Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is the next video in the use case building series with UiPath. This video is in continuation to the previous one, which we call loan application automation, which we are building for the banking and the finance domain, and the department for the use case is the loan department. In case you are coming to the channel for the first time and you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel to get the latest updates. Talking about the agenda, this was our complete agenda. We have already seen the problem statement. We have discussed about the process design document. We have also seen the solution design document, and we have also seen a sample run. So the first four are already covered in the part 1 of the video, where we have explained the complete use case in a step-by-step manner. Today in this video, I am going to build the automation from scratch. That means we are going to start with a blank template in UiPath Studio, and we would be building the complete automation, and at the end definitely we would be doing the execution as well. Okay, so this would be our complete agenda for the part 2. At any point of time, if you want to jump to a specific section, you can always use the timestamp in the description of the video to jump to a specific section. This complete use case we are going to build in RE framework but with Datatable. So as we know that RE framework is best suited with queues, but to work with Datatable we have to change the framework to work with Datatable. In one of the previous videos in the channel, which was the create identity use case, we have seen in a step-by-step manner that how I can convert an existing RE framework to a framework which can work with data tables. In case you haven't already watched that, I'll put the links in the description so you can refer that. For this video, I want you to directly get started with the framework which I have, right? I'll show you how you can download the files, where you can download the framework, and you can actually follow along step by step with me. So let's proceed to how we can download the framework and the files. To download the files, we have to navigate to this website, which is mukeshkala.com. I have put the links in the description. For the subscribers, you already know that this is the place where I have kept all the code, all the materials for all the videos whichever I have in my YouTube channel, right? So you just have to come to this website, go to this section which says downloads. In the download section, you would see these are all the previous use cases which we have already built on the channel. You can refer any one of them at any point of time. Today we are going to talk about this guy, which is the loan application processing, right? And in here you would see there is a button which says download file. At any point of time, if you want to play the video, you can click on this video links and you can play the videos as well. Okay, now to download the file, you simply have to click on this button which says download the file, and it will download a zip file for you, which is loan application processing.zip. Okay, let me open it in the folder. Okay, I'll simply go here and I would extract it. Once you download this complete zip, okay, you would have three things in the folder. The first thing is the PDD, SDD and the input file. When I say PDD, SDD, these are the process design document and the solution design document, which we have explained in the part 1 of the video that I have also shared with you in here. And you have the input file which is called the loan data.csv, which we are going to utilize in today's automation. Okay, the second thing in the folder is a template for RE framework underscore data, which means that this is a blank template which we have created, and this we have taken from the previous videos, right? So this is a blank template which is ready to use in any automation. Not only this, you can keep it with yourself, and whenever you have an automation which has to work with RE framework with data tables, you can use this framework. Okay, and in order to know how do I make it, again you have to refer to the previous video. Okay, so to get started with, you have to start with this template. This is a blank template of RE framework, customizable to work with data table. Okay, at any point of time, if you get stuck and if you're not able to follow along this video, you have this final code available here. This final code is the complete code of the automation which I am explaining in this video, right? To get started with, you can start with this template, which is called the template ref blank data table. Okay, and build this automation step by step manner with me. And at the end of this video, I assure you that you will have this final code by yourself. Okay, but at any point of time, if you want to refer this is the final code which is available with you always. Okay, so now I believe you guys have the PDDs, SDD, you have the blank template with you, and you are ready to begin with this automation. If that is the case, I want you guys to write download in the comments so that I understand that yes, we have reached till this download point. Okay, so I'll wait for your comment and let's jump to UiPath Studio to get started with the coding. Okay, so now I hope you have downloaded the template and you have the template which is available in front of me. The template is called template, which is meant to work with the data table. To get started with, I have this RE framework to work with data table. This is the main file of the robotics enterprise framework. Okay, you already have the background of the automation that what we intended to do. So let me quickly go to the Outlook first and let's see if we have received the email input or not. Okay, so as you can see, I am in my outlook.live.com. I am signed in with my ID, which is mukeshkala@outlook.com. Now to start working with this automation, the first thing which we require is that we need to get this email in the input. So what I have done, I have simply forwarded the Excel attachment to my email, right? So loan data.csv, which you download from the site, you have to just email it to your email ID, which you are going to use during the automation. Okay, so I have attached the file. This is the subject, and assuming that I am recording this video on 26th of November. So let's say the bank sent us the detail in this format, right? DD, MM and the year, right? So this would be the input file for us. Coming back to the automation, let's get started to the code. So we'll go with the start button. Then the first thing is we need to initialize, right? So I just open this initialization here. So here the first thing is system exception is equal to nothing, which means that there is no system exception. We absolutely know that we haven't done anything, so there is no exception, right? So the first thing which RE framework does is it actually goes and initializes the config file for you, right? And that happens in this XAML, which is called Init All Settings.xaml file. Okay, so here we simply go and update the config file. Let me quickly check the arguments. Okay, so it is available in the data/config file. You can keep the config file at some other location and you can pass the path directly here as well. Okay, so for me, my config is available inside this folder, data, and then we have something which is called config.xlsx. Okay, this XAML is actually responsible for reading the complete config file and provide you with an object which is a dictionary object, and that dictionary object would be now available in your complete automation, right? Which means that if you see in the import arguments, you would notice that out config is something. The config object would now be available in the complete solution. Okay, in case you are not understanding these things in detail, I would request you guys to first watch the RE framework basic series where I am explaining all of these bit in details. Once you have the background, then you can jump to the use cases. In case you already understand the input output arguments and the basics, you would know that what exactly is this guy, right? So this is the config object which we are going to utilize in the further part of the automation. I'll hit OK. Nothing, no changes here. We are okay with the init all settings, right? The next thing is the orchestrator queue. Am I going to use the orchestrator queue? The answer is no, because in this template we have changed the RE framework to work with a data table, right? So if you simply go to the data manager, right, and if I just open the variables here, okay, Now some of you might be noticing where is your variable panel, where is your argument panel from the bottom, right? So this is the new update, guys. We are working in 2022.10, and with this update all the resources are now managed by the data manager. There is a dedicated video which I have made on this channel to explain the data manager. Please watch that video so you have the context that what exactly are the features which data manager provides. Okay, as and when it comes, I'll keep explaining them. So as of now, we are interested in the variables panel. So you would notice that the transaction data is now data table, right? DT transaction data is now data table, which means that this complete framework is updated to work with data table. When you open the default RE framework, the default RE framework works on queue items, right? So we have manipulated this with the work with data table. So we don't actually require orchestrator queues. So this part is also blank for us. Second one is again for the orchestrator folder name, again blank for us. The next one, kill process, right? Why exactly do we use kill process? It's absolutely simple. Whenever I want to start any automation, right, I want to make sure that my environment is clean. I do not want to have any open application, any frozen application, right? So idea of the kill process is to have a clean environment. So basically you close all the application, you kill all the application whichever you are going to use, right? And this is a hard kill, guys. Okay, so I'll just go here and open the workflow, and for our automation we are going to use Excel and we are going to use Edge, right? So in this XAML we will only kill the application which I am using in my automation. You will not kill any other EXEs. Okay, so I'll go here, and to kill the processes I'll use something which is called kill process. Drag and drop it here. Again, a good practice, go to the properties and rename it to kill process of Excel, right? And in here in the process name you simply have to type Excel. That's it. Now what would happen when we run this automation? It is going to kill the Excel for us. Okay, same thing, we are going to use the browser, right, to open the UI bank application. So I'll go here in the properties, and this one I would say that this is kill process for the Edge, and the process name for Edge is MS Edge. That's it, right? So this is the only two kill process which we have to utilize in the kill all process.xaml file. I'll hit a quick save. I'll close this and come back to this XAML which says invoke kill all process. That is the only thing which you have to do in the kill all process. Okay, we'll move forward. Next you have something which is called add log fields. So you can actually use this to add more details to the orchestrator. So for this I am just leaving this as blank. Okay, let's come down. This one is for max consecutive system exception. This simply means that in case you are continuously getting system exception, right? So what exactly is a transaction? We have added 10 transactions to the queues. First transaction failed with system exception. The second transaction failed with system exception. The third transaction also failed with system exception. Now what do you want to do? Do you still want to continue to the rest 7, or because it is a system exception, so the chances are when you execute the transaction number 4, 5th and 6th, they might also get the same thing. Do you want to stop or do you want to continue, right? So that setting is controlled by this guy, max consecutive system exception from the config, right? And config is nothing but this guy, right, which we have read at the beginning. So here in the constant you have something max consecutive system exception which is set to 0. Okay, so to disable this feature you have set it to 0. That is the default setting. In case your automation expects that you do not want to continue it more than 2 system exception, you simply can change this to 2 and that will serve the purpose. Okay, so as a developer you should know that this is the setting which is available, and this only works for the system exception, guys, right? Not for the business exception, only for the system exceptions. That is important. Okay. Now, for those of you who do not understand the difference between a system and a business exception, it is very important to get your basics clear. Because to work as a developer, you should be able to clearly differentiate that which is a system exception and which is a business exception. Okay. So system exceptions are something which cause due to exception in the system thing, like Excel not responding, browser not responding, right? Business exception, which we'll see in this further tutorial, that how we generate business exception, but a dedicated video explaining the system and the business exception is available on the channel. The link is available in the description. Okay. So max consecutive, I want to set it at 0. Next, this is a pretty interesting one, which is called Init All Application workflow. It is asking us to open all the application which you want to use in this process. So for us, if you remember, we have to open, or I would say we have to work on Excel, and we have to work on something which is called the browser. And in the browser, we have to open the UiBank application. Now, some of you might be thinking, what about Outlook, right? To read the Outlook, I do not have to necessarily open the Outlook or open the web application and then fetch the data. Everything can happen directly with the help of activities, right? Same thing happens for the Excel also, right? You can use Excel application scope, you can use read range of the workbook, and you can directly open it, right? So there is not a necessity to explicitly open the browser to open the email or to open the Excel. Right? So what I'll do is, inside the Init All Applications, I am telling UiPath just open the browser. So I'll go here and use an activity called open browser, UI automation browser, and I'll take open browser, right? And this we are going to use for the UiBank. Now, UiPath is asking me, where is your URL? If you are trying to open a browser, you have to tell me the URL. Okay. Let me go back to the browser and let's get the URL. So this is my UiBank application, uibank.uipath.com, and we are doing the loan processing. While checking the keystroke document, or I would say the process design document, we have noticed that we have to come to this part which says loan with outstanding rate and yes, apply for loan, right? So then this takes us to loan, and then we have this button which says apply for loan. Okay. So rather than opening the UiPath bank.uipath.com or to the loan or to the apply, one good way is that I can always tell the robot to directly navigate to this URL. That will save us from 2 steps, right? So that is the difference which you bring as an automation developer. When a human user might be working, they might work to the UiBank, then they go to the loan, and then they navigate to apply. But as we have seen, it's a straight away navigation. There is no credential required. There is no authorization required, right? So I can directly instruct the robot to land to this page, fill up the details, and then I simply say submit loan application, right? So for me, the URL is this guy. So next question, I'll go here and I put it. Should I hard code it? The answer is no. We are not going to hard code anything during the automation. Strict no. Okay. Where should I put it? We would put it in the config file. So let's go to the config file and I'll go to the settings. Here in the value, put the URL here, right? So I'll just remove the URL. Okay, it's taking it as hyperlink. So to fix that, what you can do is you can paste the URL in the notepad like this, and then you simply go here and paste it here, right? And then you can just remove the hyperlink like this. Okay, so this is my URL to open the UiBank. So this is nothing but my URL for the bank, and never forgot to mention the description, right? So what is the description? This is URL to open the bank URL. What is the benefit here? Tomorrow, if this URL changes, I don't have to change my automation, right? So that is the whole purpose of the config file. We'll take this key, go back to the init all application, and now you would notice that in the arguments, let me quickly check the arguments panel here as well. In the arguments, I am already having the config object with me, right? Which is in config. So I'll go here and I write in config. What is the key? The key is nothing but the bank URL dot toString. That's it. Control plus S. We'll go back again to the properties of this guy, which is called open browser, and we have specified the URL that take it from the config file. Now, which browser you want to open? I have IE, Chrome, Edge, and a custom one, right? So for me, I am working on the Edge browser. So I'll go here and I select the Edge browser. Control plus S. We are done with the init all applications. Close this. Let's go back to the main. And that completes our initialization, right? Okay. Before proceeding, I just want to quickly tell you guys, this is what we get when we are using the RE framework. We just have to write a little bit of code and the functionalities which we get are pretty much high. If I have to write the same logic myself, I would have to do the exception handling. I would have to think of the retry scenarios. I have to write the code to read the config, take care of the dictionary. For RE framework, everything is taken care for us, right? So what I want you guys to do is just comment REF so that I understand that you know the benefits of using RE framework and you also feel the same, that yes, it is saving us a lot of time. You just have to comment REF in the comments. Okay. So that completes the initialization part for us. The next XAML in the RE framework is called the end process, right? So we have completed the initialization. Once the initialization is completed, there are two things which might happen. Everything is successful, we go to get transaction. In case of any exception, I go to the end process, right? Now what happens in the end process? In the end process, we simply close all the application whichever we have opened, right? So imagine it like this. In the initialization, you have opened some of the application to initialize, right? So once you are ending the process, you want to make sure your environment is clean. You don't have left anything so that it might not impact the other automation, right? So the in process, I'll just open this, and in here, you simply have to try to close the application. Now there is a huge difference between close and kill. So this is a notepad which I have open in front of me. If I click on this button, this is a normal close. And I say don't save, this was close. The next option is you can always use the task manager and kill it. So for example, if you are looking at the sticky notes here, right? So I can right click on it and I say end the task, and that kills it, right? So if any operation was happening, if any session was unopened, it would kill it, right? So kill and close. So what does in the end process happen? We first try to gracefully close the application. So let's try to gracefully close, right? We have this UI bank application open with us, right? So to close it gracefully, you have to simply go to the disk page and you have to simply click on, I would say, this close button, right? So for that, I'll go to this one, which is close all applications, open the workflow. And since we have already opened here, we would simply use attach browser. I'm not using open browser because we have already opened it in the initialization, right? So we'll attach the browser on the screen. I'll just point it to the UI bank instance, which is this guy, right? And then you have something which is called close the tab, or I can simply use this as well, which is click Okay, and I can point it in the close button at the top, which is this guy. That's it. Let's quickly validate the selectors once. I'll go to edit selectors, and it is said that the MSH and the title is UI Bank. Let me quickly make the selector a little bit dynamic. Okay, I'll again validate. I'll hit OK. Let's try to see the selector for the close button as well. Okay, so this is the selector for the close button. Now if you notice, it says UI Bank can 3 more pages, right? Because I have 3 more pages open. But when we are doing the real-time automation, chances are there I might not have any page, or I have 1 page, 2 page, right? So the best way is to always make the selector dynamic like this. I'll put a star, which is nothing but a wildcard. Again, as a developer, if you are working on UI automation, you need to be very much comfortable in working with the selectors. Selectors are the base of UI automation. Okay, so I'll go here, and wherever I see that there is some extra information, I'll simply put a star mark. Validate, highlight, and this looks perfect, and I hit OK. There is a dedicated playlist explaining the selector in detail one by one, and the UI Explorer as well. In case you are new, feel free to explore the selectors video both in English as well as Hindi languages, right? So I'll again go here, and in the properties, I'll say that this is the attached browser for the UI Bank, and this one, it automatically says click push button close. So I'll just rename it to click the close. That's it. That was all about the close all application. I'm not closing Excel because I have not opened it, right? And nothing to do with the email as well. Now I'll close this, and if you see here, the close all application is also embedded in the try catch by RE framework for us. So I don't have to worry about the exception handling as well. If I go to the exceptions, you would notice RE framework says first you try to gracefully close the application, which means by clicking on this close button like this. But let's say you get some kind of exception, application not responding, selector not found, or any exception for that matter. The code will automatically come to the exception. It will log a warning message, says application failed to closed gracefully. It will give you why, the exception message, and where the exception has occurred. All this detail would be logged for you in the orchestrator. And then the interesting part, it will go and it will forcefully kill. Now what is forceful kill? If you just click and open workflow, you would notice that this is the same XAML which we have opened. It will kill the Excel and it will kill the Edge as well, right? So that is the kind of functionality which UiPath provides us, UiPath RE framework provides us, and this is a good example of code reusability, right? We have written the code only in the kill all process for cleaning the environment. The same is getting used in the close all process as well. Okay. So this completes the end process as well. Okay. So initialization completed, end process completed. Okay. If you guys are following along with me, I would just like you guys to comment end process so that I know that you have reached till end process. The next stage in the robotics enterprise framework which we wanted to cover is the get transaction data. Now in the get transaction data, we have to instruct the RE framework to get the item for the processing, and that happens only if your initialization is successful. Okay. Now let's double click on the get transaction data, and I can see that this is exactly more or less what the default RE framework provides us, except of the one change which you would notice in the get transaction data. Now in the actual RE framework, the get transaction data is supposed to work with the transaction items, which is a queue item. Now here, since we are using a data table, the difference which you would notice here is that in this framework, the transaction item is a data row. It's not a queue item. Okay, so in case you want to understand why it is data row, why it is data table, I would request you to watch the video where we are converting this framework to a data table. So as of now, just understand that since we are working with a data table, so my complete data is a data table, and a data table is consisting of rows. So that's why your transaction item is nothing but a data row. I hit OK. Inside the get transaction data, instead of getting the data from the queue, now we are getting the data from the data table, which is nothing but the in-out transaction data, right? All the transaction data which you get, you have to process it. So that is the in-out transaction data which is available here, right? In case there is no more transaction in the data table, we simply set the transaction item to nothing. Now, a question arises. Till this point, in the initialization of the applications, we have opened the browser and we have cleaned up the environment. We have never read the data for this transaction data, right? I want to pass some data to the transaction data. For that, I would need to first get the data. Now, if I have to process the data here, the code for getting the data, the code for getting the transaction data would be available in the initialization state. So what happens in this framework is that first we get the data in the initialization and that data we process here, right? So the get transaction data, there is nothing to change here. That was just to show you that we have modified the framework to work with data tables. Now we have to read the transaction data. So as we understand that the reading of the transaction data would happen in the initialization. I'll open the initialization, and now inside the initialization there are multiple places to write the data. Now the question is, where should I write the logic? Should I write it here? Should I write it here? Should I write it here? Or at which location? The answer to that question is, we have to read the transaction data in this sequence where it says it is the first run and reading the configuration file. The reason for that, RE framework reads and loads the configuration file only once. So whatever code I write in this block would be executed only once. The same thing I want to happen for all my transactions. Let's say you have an Excel and that Excel has 100 items. You are processing 100 items, so RE framework is going to process each item one by one, right? And that will happen here, right? So you get all the 100 items, you process all the items one by one. Now if the item is successful or if there is a business exception, you have to come back and get the new transaction. But if I write the code of reading the Excel file again and again, after every transaction I would have again 100 items, right? So I want to make sure that the transaction data is read only once, right? This all has been again explained in the previous video. So I'll go back quickly to the initialization, and inside this one I'll just, after this thing is done, killing all process is done. Right here I'll go and add a new sequence, and I'll call this sequence that in the properties that this sequence is for reading the transaction data. Okay. Now inside the reading of the transaction data, for our use case we have to get the file from the email, right? So today is 27th of November. I can see that in my mailbox, which is mukeshkala@outlook.com, I have 2 emails, right? So this means that every month, every day, I would say every day I am receiving a new loan file. So we have to read the data which would be coming in the form of attachment from the emails, right? And we have a couple of exceptions also to handle. Okay. So now let me go back again to this point, which is called the read the transaction data. Now to read the transaction data, the first thing is we have to go to the email. I am using Outlook and I want to read the attachment. So I'll go to the activities and I'll take an activity called GetImap mail message. Okay. Let me again go here and I say IMAP. I'm not getting IMAP. The reason for that, in my project, I do not have the mail dependencies. So let me quickly go here, go to manage. In the all packages, I'll go here and I simply search for UiPath.mail. Okay. And I will install this guy, UiPath.mail.activities by UiPath. I'll hit install. Why I am installing this? Because I want to have the email activities which are provided by UiPath. I am using Outlook to get the email. For you, you can use Gmail, you can use the Outlook, you can use Yahoo Mail, anything you can use to get the email from your automation. Whenever we are using the email activities, there is something which we always required, which is port, server, and the credential. I am using GetImap because in the previous videos, I have explained how I can configure the GetImap mail messages. Where do you get the server? Where do you get the port? In case you are using some different server, you can always look for the server, port, and all the details, and you can get started, right? So for this one, I am going to use the GetImap. Okay. So in case you don't have the access to the IMAP and you don't understand where to get the server and the port, I have this dedicated video where I am explaining all of these details, right? So I'll put the link in the description for your reference. Okay. Now I have the UiPath.mail.activities available. I'll go back to the initialization, and in here, let's scroll down to the part of reading the transaction data, right? Now I'll go to the activities and let me search it again for IMAP. Awesome. I am getting GetImap mail messages. Drag and drop it here. Okay. GetImap mail messages. I'll go to the properties, and now it is asking me all these details. What is the client name? What is the email address? What is the password? What is the server? What is the port? Okay. So whenever we do all the such details and we want to configure this, right? So this port, server, user ID, password, everything should be configurable. We will not hard code anything in the UiPath Studio. And for us, since we are using the configuration file, I'll go to the project, in the data, and in the config file, I'll store all the details of the server, port, and the credentials as well. Okay, I'll just open the config file. So this is our config file where we have the URL for the bank. Right now I want to have the server, which is for the Outlook. We would require something which is called the port, right? And we would require the credential by which the Outlook would be authenticated, which means that I would require the credential to this account. Now whenever we are working with UiPath, it is always advisable to store the passwords in the orchestrator as assets, and that would be of type credential assets. Okay. If I go to my orchestrator, you would notice I have already created a asset for myself, which is called Outlook credential. This is in credential store. I go here and I can quickly show it to you that this is my Outlook credential, mukesh.kala@outlook.com, and I have put my Outlook password here, right? So similarly, you guys can also create an asset for yourself, right? I'll copy this credential name and I'll take it to this setting sheet and I'll put the name here. Okay. Now, what is the server for Outlook? One option of storing the server, port, and the folder is definitely the orchestrator. You can create multiple assets, but since we already have the config file, I would like to store this information in the config file and we will read it from there, right? So I'll just take this server here. This is the server for Outlook. The port is 993. In the previous videos, we have mentioned that how you can get all these details. So I would request, in case you haven't watched, please watch that video. So that will give you all these details, right? So not spending much time here. So I have got the server, I have got the port, and I have got the credentials, right? So what is this? This is the server name for Outlook, right? This you need to get it from the Google for the account which you are using. This is the port for Outlook, and these are the credentials, right? Always a good practice to provide the descriptions. And these credentials are nothing but the same credential which I am using to log into my Outlook. Okay. Now let's go back to the automation. And we have this activity called GetImap mail messages. Now this guy is asking me some details, right? I'll pin this properties. So first thing is, it is asking me, tell me the server. What exactly is the server, right? So my server, I have stored the server details in the config file in this one, right? This is my key. So I'll take this key name. Where is my server located? Is in the config. So I'll go to the server, and in here I simply write an expression like this. Config. This is an object which is already available. RE framework does all this coding for me, and I have this config dictionary available. From the config, it is asking me, provide me the key. What is the key? The key is the server dot toString. That's it. So I am instructing UiPath to read the server from the config file. Similarly for the port, if you will notice, it is telling me it's an integer 32, right? So whatever port you are getting from the config, that has to be converted to a integer variable, and that is in the port, right? So I'll simply write from the config, okay, get the value of the, sorry, it's not server now, this would be now port, right? Whatever value you get, you just convert that value to integer 32 so that this port number 993 is available to this guy in the port, right? So I have got the port, I have got the server. Now what is the mail folder here? Mail folder by default is hard coded to inbox. Is it a best practice? The answer is no, right? Today I am receiving the emails in this folder. Tomorrow if let's say the client says that I want to read the email from this learning folder or from, let's say, some different folder, right? Nothing hard coded. Go back to your mailbox and I say that folder name. Okay, what is the folder name? The folder name is inbox. Okay, and now instead of that hard coding thing, we'll just pass this guy in the mail folder. Remove everything. From the config, get the value for the key, which is folder name dot toString, and hit OK. That's it. So server, port and folder name are coming from the config file. Okay. The next thing here is that which email account and which password you want to use, right? So for me, I want to use mukeshkala@outlook.com and my password. That password is available in the assets in the orchestrator, in this asset orchestrator credential, right? Now to read the credential, I'll simply go to the data manager, which is available here. I'll go to the assets. You can see I don't have the assets. I click on filter, select the assets. I'll remove the others because as of now we don't require them. I'll look for the Outlook credential, which is this one, and I'll simply drag it just before here. And now it is asking me which property you want. So I want to use the get credential because it is the credential type of asset, and all the details are automatically populated for me. Now one thing here, if you notice, this asset name is again hard coded. I do not want to hard code anything in my workflow. Tomorrow if the credential changes, I have to change the code, right? So if you notice here, this asset name also we have put in the config file with this key, right? So let me just correct it. So I'll just take this key again, and instead of the asset name now, I simply write here from the config. I'll write here from the config, use this key and get the credential name, and I hit save. Okay. The same goes for the folder path also, right? What is the folder path? So I am using the admin folder, right? So this admin folder, again, I can go and take this value to the configuration file, and I can say that this is the orchestrator folder name. Okay, so this is nothing but the orchestrator folder name. No hard coding should be there, and this is the folder name for Outlook. Okay, so orchestrator folder name is the key for the admin folder. Copy this, go back to the automation in the admin folder, open it in advanced editor, and instead of the admin folder, I will now simply use the config object, pass the key, and put a dot to string. I hit save, right? So that is the only thing which you have to do. Pass the orchestrator folder name and pass the asset name. Okay, I think by mistake I removed the asset name, so I'll again provide the asset name right here like this. Provide the key dot to string, and the asset name was this guy. Copy this, go back here, paste, and hit save. Okay, cool. So we have got the credential in the orchestrator folder, and this is the credential asset it will read, and output of this would be stored in these variables. So as of now I have not created the variable. So then next thing is quickly go to the username, hit Ctrl+K, that is the shortcut. Okay, I would say that this is str_username. Go to the password, hit Ctrl+K and say password. Now what would happen? With Ctrl+K, these two variables would be created in the data manager, right? Let's quickly validate. I'll go here and I say variables, and yes, I can see str username and the str password, both the variables are available here, right? One thing quickly I want to show you guys is that if I just click on this one and I say sync with the active scope, you would only see the variables which are available in this scope, right? So this is the newest addition in the data manager feature. So you want to explore it, feel free to watch the video on the data manager where I have explained, right? So that is username variable is created of type string, and password is also created of secure string. Okay, we are good. Fine. So we have created the variables. Both the variables are available here. The next thing is we simply go back to the activity which is GetImap. I'll go to the properties, and in here in the email address I simply pass str username, and in the password just use the password variable. Okay, now it is showing me an error because this password is the string one. It is telling you to put the actual password in the string variable. That is not a recommended way. Okay, because if I put my password something like this here, anybody can see it, right? Not only you on the video, but if let's say there is one other developer in the company who has access to the code or to the GitHub or to the orchestrator, they can download and see the actual password here, right? So no more using of this variable. We have to use the secure password, and that is this variable. Okay, so we are good here. We have told UiPath to go to this server, go to this port, read this email folder, use this credential, and these are the some of the options which we need to configure here. Do I want to read the email or do I want to read only the unread emails, right? So for me, I have both the emails marked as unread, right? So I'll go here and I can leave this to the default settings. If you want, you can uncheck it. We have discussed all of this in the previous videos, right? So I'm saying that read only the unread messages. Once your processing is done, mark them as the read. Okay. Now top is a property that how many emails you want to read. For us, we are expecting only one email, right? So you can change it to 2, 3, 4, 5 depending on your condition, right? So for me, I can leave it to the 5 so that I know that yes, within the top 5 I'll get the email whatever I am intending to get. Okay, so we are telling UiPath to go and read the top 5, right? Now the same question here, right? Does this 5 has to be available here? The answer is no. This value should come from the config file. Okay, so I would just go here and I say top mails, give it a value of 5, and I would say that mails to read. Okay, you might find this typing of value into the config a little bit hectic and a little bit boring task, but trust me, when the change comes, this thing help you very much. Okay, so don't get bothered of keeping the things configurable. Dot, okay, it's an integer thing, so I'll just write here convert dot. Okay, let me just open it in advanced editor. It's not able to see clearly, right? So from the config, okay, read the number and convert it to integer 32, like this. Close this as well and hit OK. Hit save, right? So top emails we are going to read from here. So top 5 emails we are going to read. Fine. What else? Once we read this email, it is going to give us the 5 unread emails, right? Where do we want to store them? The output of the GetImap mail messages is a list of mail message. I hit Ctrl+K and I'll create a variable. I will call those as list of mails. That's it. So what we are doing, we have read the credentials, we have configured the GetImap, right? In case you don't understand all of this, please watch the video to get all these details in more details, right? So we have got the email, it will read all the emails. So I have set the count to 5. You can set it to some different thing. The next thing is we want to validate whether the email I have is the correct email or not. So for that, the output of this activity is a list. It is a collection. So we need to iterate the 5 emails and see whether I have the correct email or not. So if you remember, the client is sending us the data with this subject. This has been agreed in the PDD that the subject would be loan processing data and it has a date in front of it, right? It is for 26/11, it is for 27/11, right? So what we have to do is we have to read the data only when this subject is matching and the date should match today's date. Okay, otherwise we are supposed to skip the email. Okay, I'll again go and read both of them to unread, right? Now, so this is the subject. I'll copy this subject and again the same thing. This subject today the client says loan data processing. Tomorrow they say that we are changing the subject, right? So this subject again should be a configurable thing. Okay, so I'll take this subject, go back to our automation, sorry, the config, and I'll write here subject to validate. So this is my subject to validate. There should be no space in the keys. Okay, if you have to put, you can use underscore, but like this you can use underscore, subject underscore validate, and I'll just change the formatting to this one. Okay, so the subject which we have to validate is loan data processing. I'll hit Ctrl+S. Okay, and what else? This date we can calculate in the UiPath. Now as per your logic, you can actually see that in the body also we are getting the date. In the body we are getting the file attached name as well, right? So depending on the implementation and the kind of agreement you have the business, you can actually set up all these things in the config file so that it's configurable, and tomorrow if the client changes, you don't have to change the automation. Okay, I'll go back to my automation now. We have read all the 5 emails. So what would happen? It will read all the top 5 emails from this mailbox. And next, I have to iterate. So to iterate, I'm going to use an activity called for each. So I'll use the for each from the workflow control for each. Drag and drop it here. For each current item in where is the list? Where is your collection? My collection I have stored in the list of emails. So I'll go here and I pass list of emails. Where is this list of emails coming from? The GetImap mail messages, right? So the output of the GetImap mail messages becomes the list for the for each, right? Now, one thing which you would notice here is that with the newest, or I would say it's a bit old update, but if you see here, when I pass the list of mail messages here in the properties, the type argument is automatically set to system.net.mail message. In the previous versions, we have to manually go and select this thing to mail.message, right? But now it is all automatically selected. Now for each current item, I'll just rename it to mail so that we understand that yes, we are iterating mail, right? I'll go to the properties and I say that this is for each of mails. Now for each email one by one, what we have to do? We have to validate if the subject matches whatever we have in the config and the date also matches the subject, right? So for that, we have to evaluate, we have to write an if condition. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do that, right? So I'll go here and I'll take a if activity. Okay, drag and drop the if activity here like this. Now it is asking me what is your condition. Now my condition, if the mail dot subject, which means that all the mails which you are getting from the mailbox, if the subject dot contains, okay, if the subject contains what do you want to check? I want to check the value which is stored in the config file. Now one thing which I want to suggest you guys, whenever we are comparing the subjects and all those things, right, it is always good if you can just convert all the things to either to upper or to the lower case, right? What do I mean by that? Just look at this expression. If I write here this expression, we are writing the condition, right? So we are telling UiPath that the mail dot subject dot to lower, whatever subject you get from the email, change it to the lower case, and if it contains, which means that once you convert the subject and it contains what? Now here typically you will write whatever subject you want to validate, but for us we have put this thing in the config file. So I am going to replace this thing with the config. How do I read it from the config? The same thing, right? Use the config object, put the key. What is the key? Subject to validate. Okay, dot to string and dot to lower, and I hit OK. That's it, right? So what we are telling UiPath, take the mail subject, convert it to lower, means change the case to lower case, read the value from the config, convert it to lower, and check if the subject contains this or not. If this expression is true, it means that if the subject is matching this thing, what do you have to do? For us, if the subject is matching, we have to download it. But if you remember, we have one more condition. The condition for us is that the date also should match. But how do I convert the date to this format, right? 27/11/2022. How do I convert it? So whenever you are working on such solution, right, it is always a nice practice to create a sequence. I'll call this sequence as, let's say, test sequence, or you can say temp as well, right? Where I want to do some small kind of a conversion calculation and see what if it is working correctly or not, right? So I'll simply go here, and in the temp sequence I am using a write line activity, okay, to check the expression to convert today's date in this format. Okay, so how do you get the date for today? If you simply write here now dot date dot toString. Okay, let's try to save this. I'll go here and I say run the file. What I am trying to do in the temp sequence is that I am trying to write an expression so that I can use this expression in my actual automation, right? And I know that I have to convert the date, so I want to do some string manipulation on the date, and I want to make sure that it is working as expected. Okay, so first thing first, I have told UiPath just to go and print today's date. So I'll go to the output. It is saying 27/11 and I am getting the time as well, right? Now with this, if I just simply put a bracket, it is asking me provide me the format, right? Now to change the format, it's dd underscore mm underscore yyyy, right? So I'll go here and I write in the double quotes dd underscore mm and then I put underscore and then yyyy. You might be thinking why you have not put the capital small m here, right? Small m is for minutes, capital M is for months. Okay, so if I just try to run this now, run the file. So we are expecting the date. So let me just go back to the output again. 27/11/2022. 27 underscore 11 underscore 2022, right? So again I have to check if the subject contain this thing, which is this one, right? And this is dynamic, this will change as per the date. So I'll copy this. In the if condition, I will add this same statement again here. I'll go here. So one condition we have already written, if the mail.toLower contains this, you can always use the condition builder. This is the new update in the UiPath. You can use the condition builder to specify the condition here. This also I have explained in the data manager series. Please have a look into it to understand the condition builder, right? So one condition is if mail.subject contain this thing, I can always use an add, and I can say if the mail.subject, I do not want to use the toLower now, contains this thing, and this is AND condition. I hit save and Control plus S. So I have specified two condition here. The first condition is if mail.subject contains the subject, and the mail.subject should also contain today's date in this format, then this email is what I am looking for. Okay, so if this email is correct, do this, otherwise do that. One thing which I have not used here is that logging mechanism. Okay, as of now, RE framework has done a lot of logging for me, but when I have written my custom code, I have not written any logs, right? Let's quickly fix that. Between these two activities, GetImap and the for each, I'll go to the activities and take an activity called log message. This will help me to get the information. I'll say this is info level log, and I would say that the credentials were fetched successfully. Okay, the credential fetch were successful. That will give me a log message here, and in here I want to write mails read was successful, and I also want to print that how many emails we have read, right? So that I will make sure that how many times the loop will run. So I say here mail counts, and how do I count? We have the output, right? In the list of emails we are getting from this list of emails dot count. Count the items in the list of mails dot toString. That's it. If I just open this expression for all of you, you would notice this is what I have written. Mail read was successful. The mail count was count the list of emails which you have got in this variable and .toString. That's it. Now in the for each, we are iterating all the emails one by one. If the condition is successful, I'll write here a log message, and in here let's try to write a condition that what do you want to print as a message when the condition is satisfied, right? So I would say here input condition satisfied, okay, and I would just print the subject so that I can see in the logs that if it is working correctly or not, right? So I would just write here mail.subject and I hit OK. That's it, right? So if the subject and the time is matching to the specified criteria, we are getting this message. And the next thing is we have to download the attachment also, right? Now if this is matching, if everything is good, the next thing is we have to download the attachments. Now to download the attachment, we have an activity which is called save attachment. But before that, you have to always think as a developer, what would happen if I have this email which is matching the subject, everything is good, but it do not have the attachments. Then your save attachment activity will break. That might be a scenario, right? So before doing any download operation, you have to make sure that the attachment exists. Now for that condition can be added here directly in this one. How you can do that? Open the editor, and if you could see here, we have written first condition, the second condition, and I can write a third condition as well. Mail, which is the variable, dot attachments dot any. That's it. If the email has attachment, then you say that the condition is satisfied. Otherwise you can just write some message here, and the message could be anything, right? The message, let's say, let's open this, input condition not satisfied. That's it. And you can just print the mail subject saying that the input condition not satisfied. If it is satisfied, you write this log message. Otherwise you can change it to warning, info, trace, any other thing, right? So I'll just keep it to, let's say, a warning only. Okay. Once this is done, we have to download it. So to download, we have an activity which is called save attachments. Inside the mail only, you have something which is called save attachments. Drag and drop it here. It is going to ask me where is the mail. So the mail is this one. All the email which matches the subject, who has the correct subject name, has attachment. From that email, save the attachment and save it to some location. Now the question arises, where should it save? The answer to that is any path which you have made configurable. So I'll go here and I say path to save. Save the Excel. I'll go back to my folder. So in my D, in the loan application, right, I have created a business folder. Let's say this is the folder where it has to store the Excel. Okay. So I'll pass this path directly to the config file like this, right? So I would say that this is the folder to save the inputs. Ctrl+S, and this key I'll take and specify the same in the mail attachment activity like this, .toString. Okay, so you just create a folder path wherever you want to store the emails, take the key and pass it in the save attachment. So that will actually save this attachment in your mailbox or in the folder, I would say. Sorry, not mailbox, in this folder. I'll save this, go back to the automation, and this looks pretty good. And on daily basis, you are expecting only one email, right? So once it is successfully downloaded, I do not want to run the loop for all the emails. So that means that we have to break the loop as well. So I'll go here and I will use a break activity like that. This ensures that if as soon as my condition is matched, I got the email, it is validated, the email is saved, it will break the loop and it will not going to iterate all the other emails, right? So I'll save this and go back to the main, and that completes the initialization. Before I proceed further, let's try to see whether we are able to download the email or not. Okay, so for that I'll close the config file like this. Do I want to save? Absolutely yes, save it. Okay, I'll open the initialization, and at the end of the initialization where it says Init All Applications, I'll just put a breakpoint, and I would like to run this automation in debug mode, and in case it get any error, we will be able to fix it, right? So I'll save this automation. I can close the temp one now, go to the main, and from here I say debug. Okay, if everything works good, the robot should read the config file, open the application, initializes the application. If you will see, the edge is open at the bottom, so it should kill the edge browser. Okay, go to the Outlook, get the email and download the attachment in the business folder. All of these details we have kept configurable. So we'll just wait to see if everything looks good, or if we have made some mistake, we'll rectify that. The automation is running in the debug mode. As you can see, the green at the bottom edge is gone, so that means the kill application has processed. I can click on the output, right? So you can see on the right hand side, initializing the settings has been done, config was read successfully, killing of the processes, credentials were also fetched successfully. Okay, and it says that the mail read was successful. Total mail were 2, right? If you remember, we have total 2 emails. Input condition was satisfied because this is the subject which it has got matched, and that means that I should have the file in the, yes, we do have the file. loandata.csv is available in the business folder, right? And if I hit continue now, it should go and it will open the application as well, right? With the help of Init All Application, it will open the browser window for us, right? So that means that till this point we are able to run this automation. Okay, fine, I can stop this automation for a while, and yeah, it has opened the UI bank thing for us, right? So that means till this point we are all good. Close this. Okay, now one thing which I think as a developer I should also take care is that what happens if the file is already available in this location? Do I want to override the file, or do I want to create a new file? That is the decision which also you have to take. Now there are two approaches of solving this which I see as of now. One thing is, when we are saving the attachment, we can put underscore date underscore time and seconds so that this file becomes unique. The second thing is, what I believe, that when I am running the transaction and somebody reruns the complete robot from the orchestrator, I want it to replace the file. That also can be a solution, but you have to make sure that all the changes, previous changes, would be lost, right? So let's say we want to replace it. Okay, I'll go to the GetImap where we are getting all the emails. In the for each email, when you are downloading and saving the attachment, in the properties you have an option overwrite existing. as of now it is false. So if it is not going to overwrite the existing files. So if I just tick on this box which says overwrite existing, what would happen if the file is already available with the same name, it is going to overwrite it, right? But as a developer, it is your responsibility to handle such scenarios, right? This might not be a part of your solution design, this might not be a part of your PDD, right? But it is something which as a developer you should think. What happens if somebody rerun it? What happens if somebody deletes the folder, right? That also can be a scenario, right? We told UiPath to go and save the files in this location, path to save the Excel. But somebody can go and delete this business folder directly from here as well. If I simply go and delete this folder, where exactly the robot will save? That again a question, right? So for that you have to handle all these scenarios. So I'll quickly tell you how can you handle that. Before saving this thing here, what I can do is I can actually go and use a if condition just before saving. Okay, and okay, not if condition, actually we need to validate, right? So I will just remove the if condition. Before saving, we can actually check whether this folder is available or not. So we have an activity which is called path exist. Path exist. Take this activity, check here if the folder whatever you have mentioned is available, like this. Okay, path exist for the download folder. So I go here, hit Control plus K in the exist and say is folder exist. So if the folder exists, if this variable is true, that means the folder is available. So what I can do is, now I can take an if activity and I'll say if the folder exists, which means that this variable, if folder exists, well and good, no need to do anything, right? So I can simply log a message. I'll go to activities and use a log message activity like this. This is an info level log, and I say that folder exists. Now, in case the folder does not exist, what should I do? Create the folder, as simple as that. I'll write an error and I say that folder not exist, and I can use an activity called create folder and what is the folder? Whatever you have mentioned in the config file, sorry, my bad, which is this one. Create that folder just like this. Okay, so I have handled one exception here, which means that if this one is for I can go and rename. This is for folder exist, right? If the folder does not exist, you simply say folder exist, and if the folder does not exist, okay, sorry, it will come in the else like this. Okay, so this I have handled one exception, right? So this is your responsibility as a developer to handle these scenarios. Okay, so cool, we are done till this point where we have downloaded the email from the attachment and that is available here in the folder. Now why we are doing this? Because we are reading the transaction data that has to be processed, right? Let me quickly go back to the folder and let's validate what we have got in the business folder, right? So in the business folder, we have got this one, which is loan data.csv. Let's try to see what data we have got for 27th of November as of today when I am recording this video. Okay, so this is the data which I have got from the email, where I can see I have the title, the name, email address, credit card type, credit card number, age, telephone number, loan amount, and some of the other details, right? So this is the data which I have got to process the loan application. So if you remember, we have got couple of rules to validate that if we need to proceed with the loan or not, right? So one check which I can see here is that some of the details are blank. Somewhere age is blank, somewhere I would say the email ID is also blank, somewhere I can see the loan amount is blank, right? And then we have a condition that the loan should be only given to the people where the term is 1, 3, 5 and 10, I guess, and a condition that the loan amount should be less than 3 times of the yearly income, right? So we have to validate all of those bits if everybody is classifying. So whosoever qualifies the loan criteria will be applied in the loan system, and we would generate a loan ID for them, and the loan ID would be put against in this column, right? So that is the banker's job which they are doing, right? So this looks good to me, and yes, we have the transaction here, but these are all the transaction which has to be passed to get transaction data. I am not using orchestrator queues, so this data is not going to be loaded into the orchestrator queues, right? So this data has to be part of the transaction data. Now if you guys have already watched the videos, you would understand that we have a variable in the data manager which is called transaction data, called dt transaction data, that is responsible for creating the transaction, and it is a form of data table, right? This also we have covered in the same video which we are talking, right? Now I'll go back to the same sequence which we have been reading, read the transaction data. And from here, once the email loop is done, we have downloaded everything. Right here, I am going to use an activity which is called Excel application scope. Okay. And I am going to tell UiPath to read this from that location. But now the question arises, am I going to hard code it? The answer is no, right? So we will use the path from the config file. Okay. Now where is the Excel located? The Excel is located in the folder, right? Let me just quickly open the config. We can close this download file for a while. Okay. Let me go back to the project folder and I'll open the config file. In the config file, we already have the path to the business location, right? And now to read the config from the business location, we are going to create the path, right? So nothing has to be hard coded in your solution. Everything should be kept configurable. Okay. Now if you see here in the business folder, the data which we are getting is loan data.csv, right? Tomorrow the business might change the name of this file to something else, right? So that name of the file should also be configurable, right? So I can say that this is nothing but the file name. And what is the file name? The file name is loan data. Loan data.csv. Okay. And this I can say that this is a CSV file to read the transactions, right? I'll take this file name, go back to the UiPath Studio, and now to create the workbook path, I cannot directly hard code it, right? So I have to combine this path and this path together to create the complete path of the file, right? So how do I do that? So I simply take this one first, which is path to save the Excel, take it to the UiPath Studio. In the Excel workbook, I can write here from the config, okay, take this path, okay, and you combine it, So to combine, you have an expression which is called path.combine. Now it is asking me what do you want to combine. So I put a bracket. First I want to use this path and I put a comma, and next I want to combine it again with the config, and this time the key would be not the part to save Excel but the file name. Absolutely simple syntax, that which all path you want to combine. So I'll just open it in advanced editor like this, and this time pass it here. Okay, so and I close this. Path.combine, combine the path of saving the Excel, put a comma, and then what is the file name, right? So I have put a lot of spaces to let you guys understand the syntax. I hope you understand. Combine the path, where do you want to save the Excel, and where is the file name. So what it will give, it will give you the business type path / loan data.csv. that is what I require. I hit OK, Ctrl+S, right? Error gone, and we are reading this Excel, this CSV actually. Now what is the next thing? The next thing here is this file may have multiple sheets, right? Let me just quickly open this. The sheet name here is called loan data. This again might change in future, right? So I'll go here and I create this also in the config. The sheet name is loan data. Okay, and this is nothing but the sheet name for the data. All the things has to be kept configurable so that we don't face any challenges when in future the business changes the data. Okay, so now I have got the Excel application scope. To read the Excel, I am going to use an activity called read range, right? We have got two read range. I am using the Excel read range. Again, the same thing guys, Excel is a very important concept. In case you are new to the UiPath world and you don't understand Excel automation, I have this dedicated playlist explaining all the Excel activities. Please have a walk through it so that you understand that why we have taken this one, right? So I have taken this because I am using the Excel application scope. Okay, now what is the sheet name? The sheet name for me is again coming from the config file, and we just pass it like this, .toString. Okay, do I want to read all the data? Yes, I want to read all the data. I'll go to the properties, and in here, once I read all the data, right, I want to store it in a data table. Now this data table is your transaction data table. So here you do not have to create a new variable. Here you have to use the DT transaction data, which means that I am instructing UiPath that in the coming phase of the RE framework, to get the data, you have to use DT transaction data. So that is it. In the right range, I have also checked this one which says add headers, which means that it is going to treat the first data as the headers. Okay. Now, so this I have done, and that will give me the transaction data. Again, the same thing, I'll use a log message activity here before the Excel application, and I would say that this is a info level log, and I would write a message that reading the Excel from, I'll paste all of this here so that I get the path, that whether my automation is behaving correctly or not, right? The more logs you write in the automation, the more easy it would be when you are working in the debugging, right? If there is any issue, that will help you. So I'll again place one more logs, and I would say here read was successful, and I would just print that the total records total records in Excel maybe, and I would say plus like this, dt transaction data dot rows dot count. Don't worry, I'll explain this, dot toString. Okay, what I have done here is I am going to write an expression. If the read is successful, I am telling UiPath to write a message saying the read was successful and the total records in the Excel. Now where are the total records? It are stored in the DT transaction data, which is all this data is coming in a data table. I am telling UiPath to read all of that, store it in this variable. With this is coming from the read range. Dot rows, get all the rows, count them, that how many are there, 10, 20, 100, 200, and print it in the form of a string. This way, once I get this count in the output panel, I know that yes, I have got these many transaction data. Okay, let us hit a quick save. I'll go here, I'll close this config file, right? Do I want to save? I say yes, I want to save. And this loan data, I will actually go and again close this loan data as well. Before running this automation, let's quickly check in the Outlook, right? So because we have already triggered this automation last time, so Outlook has marked this email as read. So when I rerun, I won't get this email because it is already marked as read, right? And we have instructed UiPath to read only the unread emails, right? If you see here in the GetImap, we have instructed UiPath to read only the unread emails, right? So let me just uncheck this for a while, right? So that next time, even if the email is marked, I no need to come back here, right? So you can again, that depends on your implementation. So I have removed this one, remove unused, and remove unread I have unchecked. So now from the next time it is going to read irrespective of the status, right? So I'll save this, and we have already instructed it to replace it, right? So if I go here and I run this automation now, I have a debugger which is placed at the bottom, yes, at the Init All Application. If I run this again, what I am expecting, I'm expecting a count of all the records from the downloaded attachment, okay? And that will make sure that my get transaction data is having all the transactions, okay? So I'll go here and I simply say debug. The automation has started. The first thing again it is going to do is kill the edge, and then it process. Okay, edge is killed. Let me go to the output. Credentials were fetched successfully for the GetImap. Again, we have 2 emails in the mailbox. Yeah, it says the folder already exists. Remember, we checked the folder existent, so folder already exists. Now the next thing, it is reading the data from the Excel, from which is this part, D data loan application, and it says that the read was successful and the total records in the Excel were 100, which means that my automation is working as expected. So till this point we have done the configuration of the assets in the orchestrator. We have connected our system to IMAP. We have read all the emails. We have checked the input condition, that is for the subject and for the date as well. We have handled a business scenario where the folder does not exist. We have handled and catered that as well. In case I delete the folder, it will automatically create the folder. And then we have also checked that whether we are getting the data correctly or not, right? Again, this loan data.csv is coming from the config file, right? So this completes our reading and loading of the transaction data in the framework. Okay, so if you are able to follow along with me, and in the output you can see the records which are available in the Excel. just comment transactions, right? So that I know that we all are completed till the transaction stage. Next, once we have got the transaction from the get transaction data, all of these transactions would be one by one passed to the process transaction state. Now, this is the place where the actual business logic would be written for the transaction one by one, right? So this is our data which is in the loan data.csv file, okay, and all the transaction would be passed one by one. Now, depending on the kind of data, it might be a successful transaction, there can be a business exception, or there can be a system exception as well, right? In case of system exception, we want it to have a retry, so it goes to the init all settings and then retry, right? This all we have discussed in the RE framework series. Now in the process transaction, we would be getting all the transaction one by one from the Excel, and here we have to write the business logic, okay? So I'll double click to open the process transaction. The first thing you would notice here is that business exception is set to nothing. So that means that we don't have any business exception at this point, okay? So let's move forward to go to the process.xaml work file. This is where we are actually going to write the business logic. To start with the process, we have to go to this one which is called the process XAML. I'll go and I say open workflow. In the process.xaml, you would notice there are two things which are coming as an argument, right? So to validate that, I'll go to the data manager and I'll take the arguments from here. In the arguments, you would notice that I have got two things. The first thing is the config object, which is having all the settings which we have kept configurable. The second thing is the transaction item. Now what is that transaction item? That transaction item is this detail: first, second, third row, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So all of these records from the Excel would be passed one by one to the process transaction state. And this is where I am going to use these two details to do the next set of processing, okay? So what are the next set of processing? The next set of processing is that we have to populate the UI bank application and get the loan details, right? But before that, there were some things which we need to take care, which is handling of the business exception, which means that from these records, we do not have to process the record if the email address is blank or the loan amount is blank, or let's say if any of the column is blank, we do not have to process the record. The loan term should be 1, 3, 5 and 10, right? We should not process if the term is something else. And the next condition was the loan amount should be less than the 3 times of the yearly income. So all these three conditions we'll validate first. If any of the condition is not matching, we'll generate a business exception, and if it is generating, we will just get the loan number, okay? So I am back into my automation here. Before directly writing the automation in the loan bank, so I'm going to go here and I'll take a sequence, okay? In this sequence, I am going to call this sequence as data validation, right? So I'll just go here and I rename it to data validation. I am going to validate all the transaction data one by one, right? Okay, so now to get started with the data validation, first of all, we are going to create the variables for all the input which we are going to receive from the Excel file, okay? So I'll quickly go to the data validation and I click on data manager. This is where we create all the arguments, right? So I go to the variable, and as you can see, I do not have any variable. I have to create multiple variable. With the 2022.10 update, I have this feature where I can create variables in bulk, right? So absolutely good feature. Right click here and I say bulk create variable. I'll create new, Okay, so what all details we have to store? So we have to store name. So I'll create str underscore name that is of type string. I'll hit on new. Next I have to create it for email. So I'll go here and I write str underscore email. That is also going to be a string. So I'll write str underscore string. Next we required the age. So that is going to be integer. So I say int underscore age, and this one I would be saying that this is of type integer. Okay. Similarly, we have something which is called term, right? So int underscore term, that is again of type integer. Next we have something is a variable we required for yearly income. So I'll go here and I create a variable for yearly income, something like this, and the type would be integer. And the last one is for loan amount. So I'll quickly go here and I create a new variable for the loan amount and I call this as loan amount. Okay, it would be loan amount. This would be again of the type integer, right? So these are the variables which we would be storing the value so that we can insert them in the UI bank application. But before inserting, we need to validate, right? So as of now, I have just created values. We do not have assigned the values from the transaction item. So once this is done, you simply have to go here and click on this button which says close. Going back to my input data, once this process is running, I am going to get all these details one by one in the transaction, and we need to validate whether this value is blank or null. Okay, whether age is not null, there should be loan amount, there should be yearly income, the term should not be blank, right? All these we have to validate before we insert the data into the actual application. Okay, so the first thing is I'll go to my UiPath Studio. In the data validation, I'll go and I take a sequence inside the data validation and I call this sequence as name validation. Okay, first I want to validate whether the name is correct or not, right? So I'll go here, I'll take a if activity, drag and drop the if activity inside the name validation, and in here I would write in transaction item. In the transaction item, I am telling UiPath to look for this one which is called the given name. Okay, and now we have to validate whether that is null or blank, right? So I'll quickly open this in the advanced editor like this, open editor, and now I can write a condition here. So this will give me that value. This is a string, so I'll write here dot to string. Okay, so this is the value which we have to evaluate whether this value is null or blank. Okay, so I'll hit Ctrl plus X and I'll just check here if string dot is null or empty. Okay, this value, the complete thing, right? If it is null or empty, or if it is null or white space, string dot is null or white space, and in the bracket you put the same value. If this condition is true, which means that you are getting a null or a white space in the given name, which is here something like this. If this name is blank, you just throw an exception. Now to throw an exception, we have an activity called throw, and here I have to generate a business exception. Now to generate a business exception, you have to use this one throw. I'll go here and I open it in editor, and this is the syntax: new business rule exception. In the bracket you have to write a message, that what is the message you want to give. So I say that the given name is blank. Okay, and I hit OK. As an RPA developer, you should be very much aware of something which is called exception handling. What is business exception? What is system exception? All of these concepts I have explained in dedicated videos, both in English as well as Hindi language. If you are new to exception handling, I would request you guys to watch that videos of exception handling, and then you would be very much comfortable in this part whatever I am doing now. Okay, in case you are totally understand, so I hope you understand that we are generating a business exception. Okay, in case this value is not null, then what is the else? What do I need to do? So in case if it is else, so I'll simply take an assign activity, and I would say whatever value you have got in the transaction item, assign that value to str underscore name, right? So if you see here, this is the same expression. Whatever value you get in the given name, convert it to toString and assign it to str underscore name. So that way your name validation is done. Actually, I do not require this. I can drag it outside. Yeah, only single activity, so we don't require a sequence. Okay, I'll remove this name validation, right? And this one, this if, okay, let me go back again, sorry. So this if I have written for the name validation. That's it. So inside the data validation sequence, the first if, which will do the name validation, it will first check whether the given name is blank or a white space. It will generate a business exception. Otherwise, it will simply give you the name here, right? Now, one thing which I want to do here is that I want to use a log message activity so that I understand which all data I am getting, right? So I'll take a info level log here, and I'll simply write an statement here. Name was available, right? And I am just printing the name. The name is in str name variable, so I'll just move it down, and here I would write str underscore name in the log message, right? So that when I am looking at the logs, I understand that which record is actually getting processed, right? So name validation is done, where I am validating the name, right? What else we have to put into the UI bank? Name is done. The next thing is the email address, again a string. So I'll copy this same block, paste it again, and this time I'll simply change the name to email validation, right? We can reuse the code, we don't have to write it again. Now the same condition for the email validation from the transaction item. I'll just open it in the advanced editor by right clicking and selecting the open editor. Now the only thing which will change is the email address. Copy this, string is null empty for email address, check for white space for email address, hit OK. If you find that it is blank, so instead of the name, just say that given email address, okay, given email address is blank. So this is the exception which we were expecting to get back to this cell. Okay, so given email address is blank, in case everything is valid, we just have to store this value into a str email, and this time instead of I'll just open the editor, and in the given name I want to pass the email address to the variable, right? And in this one I'd simply say that email was available. Okay, hit a Ctrl+S to save this. So we are done with the name validation, we are done with the email validation. The next thing, we have to validate whether the age is not blank or right. So it should not be blank. So I'll copy this same block again, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and this one I'll call as age validation. The same concept will apply here, but this time, so let me just open this in the advanced editor. Now the age column is age, okay, and here from the transaction item, check if age is not blank. If this is blank, I would say that the age is blank. Its age is blank, okay. And in case if it has some value, I have to store the value in integer age variable that we have already created, right? Now you would notice it is getting me an error. It is telling me that you are trying to convert a string variable to an integer variable, and that's true, right? Integer age is an integer variable. So let's quickly fix that by opening this in the editor, and I am telling whatever value you get it from the age, it's not a string, it's a integer. So how do I convert? Just write convert dot to integer 32, and this thing will come in bracket like this. Okay, so previously I was converting all the data to string because name and email ID was string. This time I am converting it to integer because age is an integer. And right here I would say that age was available, and I can remove this quotes here. Okay, I just correct the spelling for available as well. Okay, control plus S. So that gives me the age validation also, right? So we have validated the name, we have validated the address, age, we have to validate the loan amount, term and yearly income, right? Because without this our loan application is not valid. I'll copy the age validation again, and I'd rename this thing to the term validation, right? And the term is coming in a column whose name is term term, right? So again the same thing, I'll go change it to term. In here this again goes to term, business exception, term is blank, and if everything looks good in the else part, just assign the value into the term. And now term is also an integer, so this thing works for me, right? Because we have converted age to an integer, so term is automatically converted with this syntax, right? And the message, term is available. I hope you are understanding this concept, that what we are trying to do, we are first checking the data validity, right? We are not checking the business exceptions, we are checking whether the data is available at least, right? Next is for the loan amount. This thing should exactly match whatever you write in the transaction item. Okay, so the next thing, I'll validate it for the loan amount, paste it here. If it is blank, I would simply say that the loan amount is blank. If everything looks good, this variable would be populated, the variable is loan amount, and we have to convert the value which is coming in loan amount, and in the log I want to have a message that loan amount was available. Okay, so this is done. We have validated name, email, age, term. Okay, so this is for the loan amount, right? Why I am renaming this? Because in case of any exception, I would be actually able to come to this point and see what is happening, right? So that is why it might take some additional time to rename, but trust me, it helps a lot. Okay, I'll again copy paste the same thing, and lastly we are going to do the same for the yearly income. Copy this, go back here, and this one I would say that this is for the yearly income, and yeah, loan amount. Okay, sorry, yeah, okay, let's just rename it first. Okay, so this is for my yearly income, validation. Okay, and in here I would write that if the transaction item of yearly income, right, that is correct, and we have to check for here as well, right? The same thing, copy paste, only changing the data from the transaction item. If everything looks good, we just change this one also, yearly income is blank. If everything is good, we are going to provide this value into the variable called integer yearly income. Okay, and here we just convert that value of yearly income, and if everything is available, I would say yearly income was available. Control plus S to save the automation. Okay, so with this I complete the data validation part of the input file, which means that before doing the business validation, the bot will come and it will check if the data is correct or not. In case of any exception, it is going to generate a business exception, and that business exception we are expecting to write it here in some location like this. Okay, so if email address is blank, we are expecting a message says email address is blank. If age is blank, I would say age is blank. If loan is blank, I would say loan is blank. Okay, so like that we have put all this validation condition here, right? I would like to take a pause. If till this point you are following along with me, I would request you guys to comment data validation in the comment box so that I understand that till this point you guys are with me and we all have reached to the point of data validation. So you just have to comment data validation. So now that we have done the data validation for all the inputs, the next step which we need to take care in the data is that my data should be in line of the business rules which were mentioned in the process design document. Okay, so let me quickly open the process design document which we have discussed, and these were the scenarios which as a developer I was supposed to handle. The no email scenarios, that is already been handled. Email without attachment, we have applied a check in the email. We have applied a check while downloading the email that the attachment count should be there. CSV having no data. Now what happens if the CSV which we download is not having any data? The benefit of using RE framework is that whenever there is no data, what would happen if you simply go here? In case of no data, the transaction will automatically move to no data and it will end the process, right? So this is already taken care by the RE framework for me, right? The last three are the business exception which we need to handle now if the data is available, right? So the first thing what I did till this point, we have validated if any of the data is blank. Once I have got all the data which is not blank, the next thing would be to validate these condition. The age should not be less than 18. There is a typo. It should not be less than 18. The age should not be less than 18, which means that the person applying for the loan should be 18 years and more. The loan term should be only 1, 3, 5 and 10. So if you see here, we have loans which are coming for 15, 12, 13, 11, right? So all these loans should be rejected. We only should have loans where it is 1, 3, 5 and 10. The last one, the loan amount should be less than the 3 times of the yearly income, right? So let's say my yearly income is 100 and I am planning to have a loan of, let's say, 500, right? So 3 times of my income is 300. 500 is definitely more than 300, so I am not eligible for the loan, right? So these 3 conditions I have to validate in order, right? So first this condition, second this condition, and third this condition. Let's quickly go to UiPath Studio and validate the scenarios. Okay, so I'll go back to the process transaction. Now in the process transaction, I'll hit open workflow. This is the data validation, and in each of the data validation we have a throw business exception, which means that in case of any of the block is breaking, it will send a null data and it will stop the process. If let's say any record pass all the data validation, the next thing which I want to do is I'll drag and drop a sequence and I'll call this sequence as, let's say, business validations. Okay, and here we are going to specify the business validation. The first business validation is the loan term should be 1, 3, 5 and 10, right? So how can I validate that? I can simply go to activities, right? I'll take a if activity and we want to check the loan term. So the loan term is available in the variable which is called term, right? Now 1, 3, 5 and 10, these are the 4 numbers which we want to make configurable, right? We do not want to hard code this stuff in the program because in future if it changes, I do not want to change this automation, right? So a quick way to do that is that I can go to my config file which is available here. In the config file, I can create one more entity. I'll call it as loan term maybe, right? And here I will provide comma separated value 1, 3, 5 and 10. So these are the terms for the loan. In future, if it changes, the business can just come here and update this. So this I have added in the config file 1, 3, 5 and 10. These are the loan term, and when I read it in UiPath, I am going to get this in the form of a string, right? Now simply I can use a if statement, and in here I'll just read the value from the config file, which is in this object, right? Where is the config? I can always check in the data manager that the config is available in the arguments in config, right? So I go here and I write in config. I'll just specify the key. The key for me is the loan term. I'll pass the loan term here like this, dot toString dot contains. If this complete thing contains the term, that means whatever term you have, if that is available in that string, you are happy to proceed. Otherwise, you have to throw an error saying that the term is not valid. Now here, one thing which you guys can do and which I want you to explore is that you can always get this data from the config, convert it to a list of integer, and then check the term directly in the list of integer, right? That would be a good approach to do this, right? You have to convert this thing to a list of integer, and in the list of integer you just see whether the term contains in that list or not, right? So that implementation I'll leave it to you in this part. Okay, so as of now I am simply doing a string manipulation. You can do it with the help of a list of integer and checking the term in the list of integer as well. Okay, so now if the loan term have this thing, then we are having a valid loan. We are good to proceed here. Otherwise, I have to throw a business exception. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an activity which is called throw, and here I'm going to write new business rule exception, and this time I would say that the loan term is not valid. Okay, and close this. Okay, I'll just remove the extra double quotes. Yeah, loan term is not valid. Click on save, and that way it will going to throw an exception. The loan term is not valid. If the loan term is valid, we don't have to do anything, right? So that loan term we are going to proceed further, right? So we do not leave anything blank. So simply I would use a log message here, right? I can have a info level log, and I can say that loan term is valid, and we can print the loan term also, right? Which is in this one, dot toString. Okay, so that way I have validated whether the loan term is valid or not. Okay, so this looks good. I can see some error here. Long term okay, so in term is an integer, so I'll just have to write here dot toString, right? Because term is an integer variable and we are comparing it with a string, so that's why giving an error. Okay, I'll do a Ctrl+S, and yes, this is gone. So this is for the business validation of the loan term. So I can simply go here and I change this to loan term. That's it. So I have done this validation. The age should be less than 18, right? So again, I'll take one more if activity here, and this time I have to validate the age. So I can always write an expression which is the age should be greater than 18. If the age is greater than 18, we simply log a message, right? And in here I can specify that it's an info level log, and in the age I can mention that age is valid, and I was simply print the age here like this. Now what happens if the age is not valid? We have to generate a business exception, right? The same concept. Now I think you guys would be understanding that how we are writing the code through a business exception. Open it in the advanced editor, and here I simply write new business rule exception, and I say that age is not valid as per the loan. Okay, and I hit save. You can give any message. Now one more thing which you can actually incorporate here is that you can actually try to put these messages also in the config file. That way in future, if your business tells you that I don't want to have this message, or there is a slight change in the text of the messages, you don't have to redo the automation, right? So I hope you understood the concept that anything which you feel might change in future, put it in the config file. Okay, so if age is greater than 18, yes, if age is less than 18, we are going to get a business exception, and that works, right? So this is an if for the second validation, and this is for the age, right? The last one was that the loan amount should be less than 3 times of the yearly income. So let's try to write that condition. Absolutely simple. We'll go and take a if condition, and this time I am telling that if the loan amount is in this one is less than 3 times. So how do I do that? 3 multiply by yearly income. That's it, right? If the loan amount is less than 3 times of the yearly income, then you are good to have the loan. So I'll go and I take a log message here, and I can print a info level log, and let's print both the values, right? So I'll print that loan amount and yearly income, right? I'll print both the values so that we are able to debug, right? So in here I can say that in underscore loan amount dot toString plus I want to put a space and then a plus, and I say that in underscore yearly income dot toString, right? Don't get confused with whatever I have written. It's absolutely simple expression. I'll just open the editor and show it to you, right? So loan amount and yearly incomes are valid. So just printing the loan amount dot toString followed by a space here, so that okay, so let's do it like this. So it would print first the loan amount and then it will print the yearly income, right? So that way we are able to debug. In case the condition is not valid, right? So we want to throw a business exception. So I take a throw activity here, drag and drop it here, and I simply write the business exception, right? What is that? New. So write it here, new business rule exception, and in here just give it a message that the income condition is not satisfied. Okay, I would say that income condition is not satisfied, and I hit save. Okay, so that way I know that at least the business validations are being taken care. Okay, so if everything looks good, we should get the exception for the data validation, and we should also get it for the business validation. Okay, So I would like to take a pause here, and I would like you guys to comment business validation in the comments so that I understand you guys have reached till business validation and we are okay to run this program for till business validation. Okay, we are going step by step, right? So data validation is done, business validation is done, just comment business validation. So I hope you are with me till this point of business validation and you have commented business validation in the comments. Okay, I'll save this automation. Now what is the next thing? The next thing is, if I just see the data, first we validated for the email address, the columns which you want are not blank or not. Next we have validated whether the condition which the business has specified are matching or not. Then we have validated the term is not blank, the loan term, and we have done all of the things, right? For any of the data in this complete thing which passes the validation, both the data and the business validation is now eligible to get inserted in the loan application, which is the UI Bank, right? So let's quickly open the UI Bank in the Edge browser, right? So we are using Edge, so I'll go and open the Edge, right? So I can see I have a total of 101 which includes 100 first header. So I have 100 records, some where email ID is blank. So if I just put a filter here, right, and I could see, I'll just include everything and I'll just remove the blanks from the email ID. So I am remaining with 86, right? So these are not having the email ID, so that bot should filter out. If I just filter out the same for the age, where the age is not blank, so let me just remove the blanks, and now the count is 81. Okay, so the count is keep on reducing as they fail the validation check, right? Let's see for the loan amount. I'll just remove the loan amount also, and now we are only left with 69 records. And let's put a check that we want only for 1, 3, 5 and 10, I guess. Okay, now I am remaining only with 42 records, 42 valid records. Okay, in the yearly income also, let me just remove the blanks. Okay, now I am just remaining with 37 record which has all the data. Okay, now the bot should actually not process the other records and it should directly throw an exception. Now just imagine the kind of work the business user have to do if they have to go through all those steps, right? So as a bot, so as an automation, we are trying to reduce all those efforts, right? So the next check was in the age, I guess, right? So age should be greater than 18. So I remove all the ages where it is 15, 16, 17, and that will again significantly remove the counts, right? I have 28 records now, and the last one was I think in the loan amount and the yearly income. So that way the robot, whatever I have done manually, the same the robot is expected to do, right? So I'll just remove all the filters. Okay, so finally I have got some 28 records which we actually processed if they satisfy this condition, right? So I don't have to do it manually. Let's try to run it from the robot, right? So I have removed all the filters. Yeah. Okay, so now let's go to the application. The application was UI Bank. This one, how do I know? Because we have opened the same application in the Init All settings, right? So in the initialization step, if you guys remember, we have written the code to open the application, which is somewhere here at the bottom. Let me quickly check in the Init All Application workflow. Why this debugger is here? Let me remove. I'll open the workflow, and in the Init All Applications, we are actually opening the URL of the bank from the config, which is this guy, right? So when you are processing, right, till that time, I can expect that this page is already with me. So the next thing which I have to do is I have to directly attach the browser. I don't have to open the browser because it is already being opened in the init applications for me, right? So in the process, I'll take an activity. I call this as attach browser. Okay, I'll take indicate on browser and point it to the complete loan application, right? Because we have already opened, so we have to just attach it. Once it is successfully attach browser to msh.exe, the first thing you have to always check is the selectors, right? You have to always validate whether the selectors are correct, it is correct enough, right? So as you can see, it is showing UI bank, so I'll just put a star mark over here. Sometimes what I have noticed in the edge, that if I have opened 2 or 3 more windows, it shows UI bank and 3 more. That might cause an issue sometime, right? So to be on the safer side, I validated selector, attached it here. Now the next thing is we simply have to insert the details here, right? So email ID, loan term I have, income I have, and age also I have, right? So if the data is passing the data validation and the business validation, we have all the data in the variable. So we just need to use the type into activity now. So I'll go here and I take an activity called type into. Okay, and this one I point it to first to the email address. I say indicate element inside the browser, right? I'll go back to the browser and I point it to the email address. Okay, and here I want to pass the email ID which is in the str email. We have already validated, this is not null. Type into input email looks correct, right? I'll go and quickly validate the selector itself, and it says that it has a web control ID of email, which looks pretty stable. I'll leave this to the default setting of type into email, right? The next thing, we have to type the loan amount which is requested, right? So I'll go here and next I'm going to take the same type into activity, point it to the browser again. Okay, like this, and in this I have to provide the loan amount which is in the integer variable loan amount, right? So this time this expects a string, so I have to convert it to .toString, like this. Okay, let's quickly validate the selector this as well. So this is amount, looks good. The next one is the loan term, and it's a drop down, right? So to select a value from the drop down, what you can do is you can use an activity called select item. Let's try to see if I can simply type the value or not. Can I type it here? No, I'm not able to type, right? So I can use an activity called select items 1, 3, 5 and 10. So if you remember, we have already validated this in the business validation itself, right? So I take an activity called select item, which is in the element control and select item, asking me select and indicate element inside the browser, and let me just indicate it to this guy. Okay, and by default it has taken the value of 5. I don't want to select this one. I have the term in this variable which is integer term dot toString, right? And we have already excluded all the terms which are not 1, 3, 5 and 10, right? So that way I am good in this point. Okay, what is the next thing? So we have given the email, amount and the term. So email done, amount done, term done, so term is also done. So now the currently yearly income and the age. Okay, so now let's quickly go and use a type into activity again. Drag and drop it here. I'll point it to the yearly income like this, and this one I would say that this is my yearly income dot toString. Okay, the last one is for the age, the same thing. We'll go and we'll take an activity here, indicate, point it to the age, and in here I simply say integer of age dot toString. Okay, so that way I have provided the input to all the respective fields: email address, loan amount, loan term, yearly income, and the age. Once all of these details are done, the next thing I have to do is click on this button which says submit loan application, right? So it's a click. So I'll go to the activities, and this time I am going to take an activity which is called click. Drag and drop it here, indicate element on the browser, so which is this one, indicate element, and I point it to this one which says submit loan application. Okay, once I have clicked on submit, right, what happens? Let's try to fill some dummy details. At the rate of let's say this .com, I'll select a loan amount random, 5 years, current monthly year, and age is let's say 34, and I say submit loan application. Once we click on the submit loan application in the portal, let's see what happens. Okay, it has given me a condition check that you must be at least 18 years of old and the loan amount must not exceed 100k, right? So I think I have exceeded the loan amount, so let me quickly fill up the details again, right? I'll put a loan amount of 1000 this time, loan term is 5 years, current yearly income is 123, and age is 23. Submit the loan. Okay, if all the details are valid, the portal is actually going to show you a loan ID which is unique to yourself, right? So once you click on this submit button and all the details are valid, you are actually going to get something which is called a loan ID. Okay, now to get the loan ID, if you notice, this is now on a new page, right? So always a good practice, every time the screen changes, right, use it again in a attach browser. Okay, so I'll go here and take one more attach browser, indicate it on the screen. Okay, and I point it to this guy, right? And from here what you have to do is you have to get that loan ID. So that amount is called, so that would be, so that ID, to get that ID I'm going to use the get text activity, drag and drop it here. Okay, and I'll indicate the element inside the browser, point it to this one, right? Whenever you are getting this kind of ID, right, always check for the selectors, because sometime what might happen, you might have this ID in the selector. So if you have this ID in the selector, that might not work, right? So if you see, this time it has already got the ID of loan ID, so this looks correct to me, right? So, and if I see the top, it says MSH and the title is UI Bank, right? So I think that was exactly the same at this also. Okay, so let me quickly check the selectors. Yeah, both are same, so I can actually get rid of this attached browser. Okay, this is not required because both the attached browser selector is same, right? So this you have to always see whenever you are writing the automation. If both are same, you can merge into both into a single one, but if the selector changes as the window changes, make sure you use a new attached browser. Okay, so I'll just drag it inside the old one like this. Okay, and this should give us the loan ID. And in the properties, I'm going to store this loan ID in a variable. So I'll hit Control plus K and I call this as str underscore loan ID. That's it, right? So I have got the loan ID with me, which I wanted to use. Okay, so this loan ID is available for us. What is the next thing? Once you have got this loan ID, you want the robot to apply for the new loan, right? So for that, you have to instruct the robot to click on the apply for another loan, right? You don't have to click on this button, because if you remember, you have used the attach browser to this previous window. So to go to the previous window, you can use this button, previous button as well, or I have this direct button which says apply for another loan, right? So if I simply go here, and once this is done, I'll take a click activity. After this one, after I got the loan ID, I'll navigate my portal to the previous window by selecting apply for a new loan. Let me quickly validate the selectors, right? We can do it from here as well. Yeah, apply for a new loan, perfectly fine, right? So this looks correct. Okay, I'll collapse this. I have the name also, apply for a new name, so this is also good, right? Let's quickly go here and click on apply for new loan, and it takes me to the previous screen so that the bot can enter the next details. Once all of these details are fulfilled, the objective here was to fill this data back to the Excel sheet in this or this column, right? So how can I do that? Right? So the first thing here is you need to have a status column somewhere. Once the robot is done with the processing, right? What do you want to do? I want to have the status column fixed. So let's say your business say that we want to write the data in column N, but this N should not be hard coded. So again, going back to the config, and I say that what is the status column? The status column for me is column number N, and here I would write the status. Okay, you can change it as per your implementation, but the concept is simple. You don't have to hard code anything. All the statuses should be maintained here. When we are running this automation in a loop, right? The first time the status would be written in N2. So this is nothing but N2. How do I know? You see here, right? N2. This is N3. This is N4. This is N5. This is N6, and so on, right? So N is constant. The only thing which is changing is the 2, 3, 4, 5 and the 6, right? Now I have to write the loan ID back to the Excel sheet if everything is looking good. Else I have to write the business exception or the data validation exception in the same sheet. So for that, if you notice here in my RE framework, right, if I again go back to the main and I just open the process.xaml, right, this we have already discussed in detail in the previous section. We have something which is called the set transaction status. The set transaction status is a XAML which is responsible for updating the status in the transactions, right? I have modified this framework to work with Datatable. So if you notice here in the success, business and all those fields, I have one thing here which is a right cell. In the actual RE framework, the status is being updated to the queue, but in this framework, it is updating to an Excel. So that is why we are using something which is called the right cell, which is of Excel, right? So I hope you understand. In case you don't understand, feel free to watch the video where we are converting this framework. So that will clear your doubts. Okay. So the idea is simple. Once the process is successful, we want to update the status back to the Excel file. Now, if I have to update the status back to the Excel file, I have to use right cell activity that is used to update the status in an Excel, right? So that right cell is a part of the set transaction status which is available here. Okay. Now the same thing I have done for the business exception as well, and the same thing I have done for the system exception as well. Okay. Now let's try to fill the set status back to the sheet. Okay, I'll open first the business exception block. In the business exception block, we are telling UiPath to update the cell. So this is a framework. So these keys are expected in your config, but for us, I do not have these details, right? For us, the type of data is .csv, right? So we might not be able to use the workbook write range, right? So this thing does not make sense to me. What is the solution for that? The solution for that is to use the Excel application scope, right? So I'll go to the activities. In the business exception, I'll take a Excel application scope. Okay, drag and drop the Excel application scope. In here, it is asking me, tell me the path of the Excel. Where is your Excel, right? So if you guys remember, we have the Excel path and both the things we have configured in the config file, part to validate and this followed by this, right? All of that we have already taken care while I was reading the data, right? So Excel application scope, the path is same. We go to the config, get the folder path, get the file name and write it in here, right? So I'll just copy the same code from the init all settings, I guess, right? Or init all, wherever we are reading the transaction data, right? The same thing we have to copy paste here. So I don't want to rewrite the syntax. So I'll go to the main. Let's quickly look for the data that was in the initialization. And in here, yes, reading the transaction data. And here we have already validated get credential, all the list of emails. And then I was adding it to the Excel, right? So I was using an Excel application scope. This same thing, I can just do a Control A, Control C, and I can take the same to the set transaction status as well. Okay. So in the set transaction status, I am telling UiPath to take the path from the config file, take it, merge it and create the final path of the Excel. And now to write the cell, I'll go back to the activities. And this time I'll use something which is called write cell of the Excel. Drag and drop it here. Now, what is the sheet name? The sheet name again is coming from the config file in this variable, which is called sheet name, right? So here I simply write in config, and what is the key? The key is the sheet name. N is capital, I guess. Let me quickly validate. Yes, sheet name is this. What is, okay, it would be .toString. Now this guy is important. In the Excel, which cell you want to write, right? So as of now it is writing in A1, but for us we want to write it in N1, N2, N3, N4. So this N is fixed. Let's get the value of N from the config, which is status column. Copy this and take it back. So instead of this A, we want N, right? And where is N? The N is in the config file. So I'll simply write here in config, take the status column .toString. And now where would this number come from? Whenever we work on any solution on RE framework, okay, RE framework assigns a transaction number to all the transaction. So if you go to this one, so this is one transaction, transaction number 1, transaction number 2, transaction number 3, 4, 5 and 6. So if this is transaction number 1 and I have to write in N2, so I have to just increment the transaction number by 1. This complete logic we have already explained in the previous videos where we are converting this framework, so not spending much time on that. So the idea here is simple. We just take the transaction number in this one, in this right cell, and increment the transaction number by 1. So this will give us N. Then transaction number is already available with us in this variable called the transaction number, I guess. Let me quickly check the variable, guys. The variable is IO transaction number. Okay, so I'll go here, open in advanced editor, N, and then I would write the transaction number, which will give me first time 1. So I'll increment it by 1, so that will become N2, and here simply write dot toString. That's it. Now sheet name is dynamic, cell number is also dynamic. What is the value you want to write? So whenever we have any business exception, that would be allocated in the business exception object, right? Now in the business exception object, you have that value already coming in this flow. If you go to the data manager, in the arguments, you would notice that you have already the system exception with you and you have the business exception with you, right? So you simply have to write here business exception. Now this business exception is the same thing which you have thrown in the process.xaml. So if you just do it like this, dot message, it will actually print the same message in this sheet, this cell of this Excel. That's it. Okay, now it is showing me some error. Okay, because let me just open it in advanced editor. It is saying that I do not find the config, right? Because it's not config here, it's in underscore config, I guess, right? So the variable name should be proper. I just copied and pasted here. Again it is showing some error. Yeah, it's gone. Okay, so in this Excel, go to this sheet, take the cell number dynamic, write the business exception. So this Excel application scope is for writing the business exception. Now this right cell, you can actually comment it from the bottom, whichever I have made, right? Because that is a workbook. So I'll just delete this. This same business exception, whatever I have done for the business exception, I'll copy this, save the framework again, go back to the set transaction. I'll go to the system exception. In the system exception, you also have this right cell here, right? Delete this right cell and replace this with our exception block which we have just created, right? So now instead of the business exception, this will change it for SE, system exception. Excel name would be same, sheet name would be same, this would be dynamic. The only change would be, instead of the in business exception, this would be now in system exception. As simple as that. Control plus S. Okay, and the last thing, if everything is successful, right, there are two options for that. You can specify the success directly by writing here like this, or one other way is to update the status directly in the process.xaml. So I'll go back to the main. Okay, I'll open this process transaction. In the process.xaml, once we have all the validation done, data validation completed, I have business validation completed, I am going to the Edge browser, we are typing all the details, and once I have the ID, right, the same ID I can paste directly in the Excel. So after this, I'll paste it here, and in here same thing, right, same Excel, everything same, but the only change would be I don't want to have the system exception message here. I want to have the loan ID, right? And where is the loan ID? We have got the loan ID from the get loan ID, and that way it would simply go, and if everything is successful, we should have the loan ID available in the cell to write. Okay, now once you put the loan ID here, you would notice that I am getting an error. which says that we are not able to find the transaction number in the process.xaml. Let me check the data manager, and in the arguments I can see I only have the transaction item and I only have the config. I do not have the transaction number of IO transaction number, right? So what should I do? We can always pass the transaction number to the process.xaml also, right? Let's quickly go back to the main, and if you see here, we have something which is called set transaction status.xaml. And if I click on the import arguments of set transaction XAML, right, which is right here, we can see that the transaction number is already available in this variable, which is called transaction number, right? And it is getting passed in this one, which is called IO transaction number, right? So the same thing I can actually do in the process.xaml also, right? I can create an argument and we can pass that argument the value of the transaction number. Okay, so the same thing I'm going to do here. I'll go back to my process.xaml. In here, let me just quickly take the same variable name so that we don't have to rewrite the variable again. Open in advanced editor. I'll take this variable which is not available, copy this, hit OK. Okay, go back to the data manager, create a new argument, paste the same argument here, and this would be now in out, right? And this value I am going to change it to integer. Okay, this way I fix one error which was coming here, that you don't have the transaction number. I have created that argument here of transaction number and this error is gone. I'll hit Ctrl+S and that is done, right? Now all we have to do is in the process.xaml, I have one argument which do not have any value. I click on import arguments and I simply pass the transaction number to this variable, right? And the transaction number is always available in the RE framework in this variable called transaction number. I hit OK and we are good, right? Ctrl+S, no more errors in the automation, right? So I hope till this point you guys are with me and we have successfully updated the status back to the Excel for business exception, system exception and the success as well. Okay, now if you guys have coded till this point with me, I want you guys to comment status in the comment box so that I know that till the status part you guys have coded. Okay, the next thing would be that we run this automation and see how does it behave. Okay, I'll hit Ctrl+S and I'll wait for your status comment in my comment section. Okay, so I'll collapse this. So before triggering the automation, let's quickly validate whether if everything is in place. I'll quickly go back to my email and I can see that I have received the emails for 26, 27 and I have email for 28 as well, right? When the robot is running the automation, we have coded it to use the 28th. So today is 28th of November. So when I'm recording this, so the bot will go and it will read this email with this attachment and it should download it in the business data, right? So I'll quickly go and delete this one. I'll empty the folder, though we have already taken care of this exception, but for the first run I want to make it a clean run, right? So business folder is blank. I have the email available and we have the data, right? So let me just close everything for a while and let's try to run this automation. Okay, I'll save everything, go here and I say run the file. Okay, now if everything is working as expected and all the exception handled, and we will keep an eye on the output panel, right? So first it should go and kill the Edge browser. As you can see at the bottom, I have the Edge browser open. Yeah, I think the automation has initiated. I'll keep an eye on the log here. Yeah, as you can see, it has started initializing the settings. That means config has read, keying was done. As you can see, edge is gone now. I have got the credentials for the email. So now the robot would be going and reading the emails and validating. So total emails were 4. We have got the folder for 2811. The folder exists, which means that it was able to download, and we have got 100 records here, right? The next thing, it opened the application, UI bank application in the bottom, and as you can see, now the robot has started the processing. It is processing for Terry, where age was blank. It has started doing the validations. So hopefully this should be good, right? As you can see in the bottom, the Excel is flashing, right? That means that the status is getting updated back to the Excel. So total we had 100 records. The robot is working. For the valid records, the robot is filling up the loan application. Wherever the record is not valid, the status would be updated back, and wherever the application is valid, it's simply filling this thing. Okay, generated the loan ID, and yes, again, as I can see in the bottom, the Excel is again repeating because there are a lot of invalid data, right? So as of now, this process was done manually by a worker, bank worker, so that takes a lot of time, right? So the robot is able to process all the 100 records pretty fast, I would say. So these are all the valid records where the robot is checking the blank, null, validating the business exceptions, validating the loan criteria, and only applying loan for the people who are falling into the specified criteria of the bank. For all the others, it is rejecting at the first go and updating the status back to the Excel. Okay, so we'll just wait for the automation to complete. Let's see how it behaves. Okay, so it's again filling for all the people, apply for a new loan. So we have seen that around 50% of the record were not correct, but we don't know about this file, right? So we'll just wait for the automation to complete. We have seen that total there were 100 records. Yes. So one thing, guys, if you notice here, the Excel is every time opening on the screen, right? That is opening because we have used the Excel application scope, and in the Excel application scope, the visible property is marked to true. That is why every time we are doing some operation, write cell or anything, Excel is opening on the screen. In case you do not want to see that thing every time opening and popping up while writing, you can always go to the Excel application scope and set that flag of visible to false, right? That way you don't have to wait for the Excel to write it, right? So I have already triggered it. So I have to just wait to complete all the transaction, right? So this, I believe, would be the final run if everything looks good. And if you notice here, the robot is not actually closing the web page, right? This is also an important aspect. To submit the next loan, it is actually coming back to the same screen and then applying for the loan. Okay, we'll just wait for the automation to complete. Okay, so that completes the automation. And if you see on the right hand side, we have got these logs as well, right? So now when we were writing the logs, there's something which you can do with the logs is that you can always export this to an Excel sheet. You can have this timing here, timestamp, and then you can actually go and export this to something called a CSV file like this, and then you can analyze it further, right? So that you can always do. But for me, I can quickly see that if, let's say, processing transaction number 1, that was for Terry, the email was blank. For transaction number 2 was for Edna, and if I go till down, let me just see, the transaction number was 99 and transaction number was 100. So it has processed approximately 200 transactions from the Excel, right? Let's quickly go back to the output and validate. I hit a quick refresh. So this is our loan data.csv. Okay, so as you can see here, the robot has updated this Excel with this column, which is column N, which we have instructed, and it is showing me status, age is blank. Yes, here the age is blank, here also the age is blank. Okay, loan amount is blank. Yeah, loan amount is blank. Given email address is blank for all these records. Absolutely correct. Loan term is not valid. See, we have to only apply the loan for 1, 3, 10 and 15. So this loan term is not valid. So this column is yearly income and that is blank, right? So now this gives the banker a clear-cut statement that what has went wrong with this record. And for all the others, if you would see, it has generated the correct bank ID, right? So let me quickly do one thing. I'll go here and for the validation, I'll apply a filter and this one. So let's quickly validate. So I'll go here and I'll just check for email address, let's say. And as you can see, for all of them, the email address was missing. So that's why it says email address is blank. The same applies to, let's say, I go and validate for the yearly income. So yearly income was blank. So it has got this. Now the banker do not have to worry that what has went wrong, right? It can directly come here and validate and they can see this report. For the valid one, how do I know the valid ones? I can do a select all and you can just remove the business validations. Hit OK. And you would notice. Okay, so I checked everything. Sorry, my bad. Right, so for all these records where you are seeing this ID, right, these are the records where all data was available. I'll just put some, and it was satisfying the business criteria as well, the business criteria of having the income condition, the loan condition, right? For some of those, if I just go and take this one, income condition is not satisfied. Let's analyze those, right? Here all the data was present. The loan term was also perfect. It was having all the details. The age was also validated, but the income condition is not satisfied. So if you remember, we have a condition that the loan amount should not be more than 3 times of the yearly income, right? So if I simply multiply this 515 with 3, it comes to 1500, right? So this person is not eligible for a 12,000 loan or 1,24,000 loan. So income condition is not satisfied. So this same applies for this as well. So this all robot has evaluated and I don't have to worry about all of this, right? So this is the benefit of doing the automation, guys. We don't have to rely on the data. We don't have to do the calculation and the robot does everything for us in one go. Now the banker can directly come here, validate this, and he knows that which all loans are getting passed, which all are applied, right? So you can see here all these people which are having the loan ID are the valid ones, right? So let's quickly validate their income, right? So this guy is having a earning of, let's say, 8,000 something multiplied by 3, 24,000 is definitely greater than 4,000. So satisfying the long loan term as well. He have a valid age of 56. He has an email address and he has a name as well, right? So that means that our automation is working as expected, right? So I would like to take a pause and I want you guys to comment success in the comment if you are able to reach this same stage, right? It might take some time for you guys to reach here, but once you have completely done this automation, just comment success in the comment box. Okay, so that completes the implementation, but there are two things which are remaining here. The one thing is that we have to send a successful email, and the other part of the requirement was to schedule this robot from orchestrator, right? So these are the two requirements which I'll complete now, right? So the first thing is, once this automation is completed, we want to send an email, right, to the concerned team that yes, the automation has completed and this is the final status for today. Okay, so for that, I'll go to the activities, and to send an email, I'll use an activity called send SMTP, right? So I'll type here send SMTP. Send SMTP mail message activity is used to send an email. In case you already have Outlook installed, so you can use send Outlook mail messages, right? So I'm going to use send SMTP mail message right after this attach browser once everything is done. Okay. Now this activity is asking me, tell me whom do you want to send the email, what should be the subject, what should be the body, and which file should I attach, right? So as you are comfortable now, I think with this automation, so you understood that all these things would be kept in configuration, right? So I'll go back to my automation, and in here I'll simply go and create keys for the email success, right? So I'll say here success email to, that whom do you want to send the success email, success mail subject, okay, and what do you want to write it in the body. The same you can also do it for the CC as well, that whom do you want to copy the email. All those things would be kept configurable here. Now for me, I want to send the success email to my Gmail ID, which is mailmukeshkala@gmail.com. In the subject, I want to simply specify that loan creation data, right? So I'll remove the hyperlink. This is important because if your config has hyperlink, it might break. Okay. So in the success email subject, I'll simply go and I'll specify that report for loan processing. Okay. And in the body, I will say that attached is the loan processing data. You can write more, hi, hello, put a signature, and all those things you can do with the mail body, right? Again, a good practice. This is the receiver mail ID, right? So that we understand this is the subject and this is the body. Sorry, my bad. I'll keep the body here, and this is not subject, this is subject. Okay, so we have done these things. Now to use the same thing into here, I'll simply go in here. We already have the config. All we have to do is just pass the keys, right? So to whom do you want to send? So this is the key which I'm going to use, right? The reason for that, in future, if the business want to send it to more IDs, we can always come here, right? So till this point, I hope you understand the context of the config file. I'll paste it here. Now in the subject, in config, what is the subject, right? The subject is this guy. Okay. Similarly, in the body, this is a mail body, right? So I'm not going to use this. I will use this guy. Copy this and paste it inside the body, something like this. That's it. Now, one thing to remember here, right? I am using send SMTP mail messages. UiPath is asking me, I'll send the email to this ID, to this subject, to this mail body. But you never told me whose email ID I should use to send this communication, right? Who would be the sender? These are all the receiver details, right? Where is the sender? So whenever you are using the send SMTP details, you have to configure this activity here, right? You need to provide the email address, the password, the port, and the server, that which user detail you want or which mailbox you want to use to send this email. Okay. So for us, as you have seen that we have read the data with the help of Outlook. For sending, I am going to use my Gmail, right? So the first question, how do you get the Gmail detail? So I have got these details from Google, where I am telling that the server for Gmail is smtp.gmail.com and the port is 465. Okay. Again, the same thing. All these things we will keep in the config file, right? So I'll simply go here and I would say that this is my Gmail server and this is my Gmail port, because I don't want to take a risk where tomorrow the port changes or the server changes and my automation breaks, right? So smtp.gmail.com is here and 465 is the port, right? So this is the server and this is the port. Okay, now the same thing, take this Gmail server, copy this, go back to the activity. In the server, put here in config the server detail dot toString, and that will give you the server from the config. Same thing for the port. The port is an integer, so we need to convert it to integer. So I'll write here, first let's get the port from the config. The key for the config is Gmail port. Copy this, go back to the code, paste it here, and now this complete thing has to be converted to an integer variable. So I'll write convert dot to int 32. Okay, so this is here. So that means that whatever we are getting from the config, that would be converted to an integer variable, and that we will assign it to the port. Okay, so now UiPath understand that I want to use this server, I want to use this port. Okay, and here I am getting some errors. I think I forgot to specify .toString. Okay, so now Gmail understand that I need to use this port, this server, and I need to send to these details. But still the question arises, whose credential I'm going to use, right? Whose account we are going to use to send this email, right? In this server at this port, there can be multiple emails which are available, right? Now I want to use my credential. So I need to provide my credential or my authentication to this activity, and that is done in this activity which is called logon. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to store your credential, your secure credential, in orchestrator. Okay, I am back into the orchestrator, and here what I have done is I have created one asset where I have stored my Gmail SMTP credential. This is SMTP username and the password. I don't want it to share to the external world, so I have created an asset, and this is the best way to store the credential. So all you require is just this guy, Gmail SMTP credential. Okay, I'll copy this, we'll take it back to the automation here. Now if once you have created the asset, that asset would be automatically available in the data manager itself, right? You can go here and search for this one. If it is not coming, hit a quick refresh. Okay, so we created this asset. It is having my username and the password for Gmail. It is of type credential asset. Okay, and here we have this Gmail SMTP credential, right? So I'll just drag and drop this guy right here and select this activity which says get the credential. Now get credential has automatically selected the folder name for you, which is the admin folder, right? So now if you remember, we have already provided this in the config file, so I don't want to hard code this as well. So I'll take this name, the key name, provide it to the folder name. So I'll go here and I say that I don't want to hard code it. Okay, and I'm going to use the advanced editor. From the config, use the folder, right? Because which folder I am using, you guys might be on a different folder, and I hit save. Same goes for the asset name, right? The asset name is what we have got here, which is I think Gmail credential, right? Let's quickly check, right? Gmail thing, right? One way is to directly select it from the drop down. The best way is to store it in the config, so that in future if asset changes, you don't have to change the automation. You simply come to the config, change this thing here, and it works. Okay, okay, so this is here, and this is my credential for Gmail. Okay, I'll take this key, go back to the automation, and here I would say that the asset name, again we have to take it from the config. This is the key in the config, hit dot toString. That's it. Okay, and that way you get the Gmail folder name and the Gmail credential in your automation. Now where do I want to store? Hit Ctrl+K, create a variable called, I am creating like gm underscore username, and for this secured thing, right, which is a secured credential, I hit Ctrl+K and I'll create a password variable. I'll hit pswd underscore gmail, let's say. Okay, so that means that I am going to get this thing in the secure credential. UiPath would have created this variable for me, and now these two things would be your input for this send SMTP, right? In the data manager, in the email, you simply pass this guy, okay, and in the secure password, you will pass the password. That way you are keeping your credentials secure. I don't have to share it with anyone, and we have made the things configurable as well. Okay, so these are the details which you can configure for yourself as well, right? So now this send SMTP understand that I need to connect to this server, Gmail server, in this port with Mukesh ID, Mukesh password, and we have to send data to these details, right? One thing is still missing here. We didn't specify that you have to attach and attachment also, right? Now what is the attachment? The attachment is nothing but the same Excel which you have been updating here, right? So in the thing where you are updating the final status, right, the same Excel we want to attach, right? So this complete Excel application scope path, whatever we have, right, if I just copy this, Control A, Control C, right, this Excel which is getting updated has to be attached. So you simply go here, click on attach files. In the directions, you specify it as input string, and here just pass this one. Now this variable actually takes the complete path of the Excel file. Okay, it should be the complete path. It should not be a temporary path. It should be a complete path. And all of these things we have kept dynamic, and I hit OK. That is it, right? So once I run this automation, the expectation is automation will completely run, do everything, and then this email will be sent to my mailbox with attachment which is having the all the statuses which we have seen. Okay, so this completes our automation. The next bit of the automation was that we wanted to schedule this automation. If you remember our discussion from the SDD, let me quickly go back to the solution design document. So this was our runtime details where we have been doing all of these bits, right? And this says that your schedule should be running at weekly 6 a.m. CET, right? So this is the time which business has given me that I want to have this automation running on this time. How do I do that? So that schedule will be done from orchestrator, but for that we need to publish this thing to orchestrator. Now, in case you are new to publish, it's absolutely simple. You simply go to the design, click on this button which says publish, okay, and make sure that you are connected to your UiPath assistant. As you can see, my thing is green. I am connected to my assistant and I am connected to admin folder. Okay, so my UiPath Studio is now looking for any validation error before it could publish. If everything is good, it will simply take this project into my UiPath orchestrator, and from there we will schedule it at the time which the business has told us. Okay, now once everything is coming here, you would see this window which is popping up. It is asking me what is the package name which you want to publish. I'll keep everything to the default settings. And just remember that my project name is template ref Datatable because I haven't changed it, so you guys can change it. So this time this package might be different for you guys. Okay, so I'll hit next. Now where do you want to publish this? I want to publish it in the tenant, and I hit next and I hit publish. Okay, so that means now I have specified UiPath that I want to publish this to the admin folder of this orchestrator, right? How does it know that which orchestrator I have to publish? These details are available in your UiPath assistant. Okay, again it is connected and licensed, it is compiling this thing, and now once everything is done, I will get a message that your publish was successful. Okay, I have got a message which says that your config is open. Yeah, because my config is available in the D drive. I have kept the config open, that is why it is not able to publish. I'll close this config, right? Make sure that you save your changes before you do anything. I'll hit OK. Go back again to the publish, and yeah, I'll hit again publish. Okay, the settings are saved. So okay, so once it is published successfully, you would see that there are two details which are coming, the name and the version. I'll copy this to clipboard, right? So that will help you to get more details. Okay, so this shows you all the details which are published, right? So this is the project name and this is the version 1.0.1. okay, I can hit OK here and the job is done in the studio. Let's go back to the UiPath orchestrator, and in the tenant, okay, first I'll validate whether the package has arrived the orchestrator or not. Okay, so I'll go to the tenant. In the packages, right, you have to search for this same name, which is template_ref, right? So yes, as you can see, this has been published a minute ago, right? So this is available in the orchestrator. Now, can the robots directly execute it? The answer is no, right? Because we need to first create a process out of the package, right? And that thing is done in the respective folders, right? In case you don't understand orchestrator and basics, there are dedicated videos explaining this thing both in English as well as Hindi languages. The link to the videos are available in the descriptions. Okay, so I'll again go back to this folder. In the process, right, the first thing we have to do is we have to create a process out of that package. How do I do that? It's absolutely simple. Click on this guy which says add process. Okay, and here you select the package. Now what is the package? The package is nothing but this guy. Okay, now it is going to ask you, what is the entry point? The entry point is main.xaml for you. I have only one version, so this looks good. I'll hit next. Next, what do you want to call this process? I want to say this process as this is my loan application processing, right? So you have an option to change that here, and yeah, I'll just create the process. The process is created successfully. Do you want to start it now or do you want to add a trigger, right? So for now I'll simply close this, and admin folder will have my process created. The process name is loan application processing. Till this point also we have just created the process. Now if I simply click on this process, that would go and execute the process, but that would be a manual execution. If you remember from our solution design document, which we have explained, that we need to schedule the process at weekly 6 a.m. CET, right? So that thing is done in the triggers. Okay, in the triggers you simply have to go and click on this button which says add a new trigger. In UiPath you have particularly two kinds of triggers. One is the time trigger and the other one is the queue trigger. Time trigger is used whenever you want to have a recurrent kind of jobs which you want to run same like an alarm basis. The second type of the trigger is a queue trigger, where you execute a job whenever there are some items which are added to the queue. Okay, so for this one, as we can see in the SDD, it says that we want to run it on the weekly 6 a.m. CET. That means that this qualifies for the time trigger, right? So I'll go to the time trigger here, and here you have to give a process name. So for this one I'll say that this is a loan process trigger. Okay, the next thing it is asking you, tell me which process you want to schedule. So I'll go to the drop down, and the process is this one, loan application processing, which we have been working upon. Okay, how many times? All these details you can set as per your requirement. So you can be in an organization where you have multiple machines, you have multiple robots, multiple accounts. All these execution details might look different, but for me I want to leave this with the default settings. Okay, this is a bit which is pretty important, which is called the time zone. Now if you see here, the time zone for us is 6 a.m. CET, right? So now if I go here, I have to run that time in CET time zone. Now CET is the Central European time, and that is 1 hour ahead of the UTC. So I'll simply go here and I'll select this one. This will make it as a CET time. Okay, so whatever time you select, that should be properly aligned as per your requirement, right? So for us it is weekly 6 a.m. EST, right? So I'll just select the time zone first here and weekly. Okay, and it says that 6 a.m. CET, right? Weekly at 6 a.m, right? So as in the starting we have seen that we wanted to run it at the end of the week, so for us it is weekly, and the end of the week would be Friday. So this is 6 and 6 a.m, right? And I'll hit add. That's it, right? So as you can see, we have created the loan process trigger, which is running at 6 a.m. only on Friday, right? And next it will execute in next 5 days, right? So that means we have deployed the process in the orchestrator that is available right here. Whenever this time reaches, it will automatically go trigger this email, go to the mailbox, download the email, fetch, do the processing, and send the successful emails, right? So that completes our end-to-end implementation of the loan processing. Okay, in case you are able to follow along this point and you have successfully created a trigger with me, I want you guys to comment down trigger in the comment box so that I understand that yes, people have reached till creation of the triggers. Okay, so I'll wait for your comment and let's move forward. Okay, so I think we are done with the complete automation thing. We have validated the output. The next thing, to get the success email and this trigger validation, I'll leave this part to you. Okay, and in case you are new to triggers and you don't understand how does a trigger work, we have a dedicated playlist explaining the time triggers and the queue triggers. Please have a look into those videos and you will get to understand that how the triggers work. Okay, so that is it all for this use case. Okay, in case if you have any more questions, any more doubts, you can always reach out to me via the email ID which is mentioned in the description. Okay, for the files, I have already shown it to you that you would be able to get all the files on my website, which I have demonstrated at the beginning. Still, you have any more questions, any more doubts, feel free to reach out. Okay, and similarly, if you have more use cases which you want to discuss, we can always create the same use cases on this channel, right? So if you have any idea of the use cases, feel free to drop me a note and we can connect and we can create those use cases. Okay, so I hope this use case was helpful and you were able to complete this use case, and that will give you a good understanding on the RPA UiPath robotics enterprise framework. Okay, so that is it for this video. I hope you like this video and you were able to create this use case. Feel free to share this to your colleagues, to your friends who are understanding UiPath. And in case you like this video, please do subscribe to the channel, and happy automation.